Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel, and also on that Public Access Facebook page, and will be found on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours after the meeting. If you wish to join via Zoom, the meeting ID is 909-174-0347. The agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. So would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first matter of business is public comment, and we welcome comments from the public. Comments addressing topics under the scope and authority of the school committee are welcome at either public comment section. Please remember, this is public comment, not discussion, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Each public comment section has a maximum of 10 minutes. Comments about individual students are prohibited by state and federal law. Is there anyone with a public comment this evening? Anyone on the board? Mrs. Kelly?
I just wanted to say I will not be running for re-election in March. It is nothing personal against the committee. I absolutely love this, but work has just become too overwhelming. So I encourage anyone who is interested to reach out to us, and we can maybe give a lowdown on what goes on, and make sure to pull papers before the caucus in March.
All right, well, we are sorry to see you go.
I'm sorry to leave too, but maybe I'll come sit in the audience because we obviously need people.
Yes, that would be good. Okay, thank you. Anyone from the public with a public comment? I don't see any hands. No hands? All right, then we will continue on. Our next item is the chair's report, and I hope everyone had a good holiday break, and we are all ready to get back to school and back to business. The chairperson of the Municipal Building Committee was in contact with me regarding some questions about our response to his initial questions. He indicated our concerns with our early childhood programs would be addressed at their next meeting. I want to thank Dr. Burnham and her team for adjusting our meeting schedule and the extra work that was involved in bringing the proposed FY24 budget to us this evening. As the local weather people are predicting a possible icing situation this evening, I would ask, as we go through this meeting, we keep our comments as concise as we can. And that would be what I have this evening. Next would be to review and approve minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes from September 21st, October 5th, and October 19th. Does anybody have any concerns with the minutes?
The only concern I had was I was not present for most of the October 5th meeting, so I'll abstain from those minutes, just to redo them separately.
All right, we will do them separately. Is Mr. Schoolambrini present? No, I don't think so.
I don't see him yet.
Okay. I was anticipating he would be virtual this evening. Okay.
And make a motion to approve the minutes from September 21st and October 19th.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And a motion about the 5th.
Motion to approve the minutes for October 5th.
I'll second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
And 1 abstain. All righty. We have no line item transfers, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone. An update on...
Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Okay. So again, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. An update on our efforts to prepare to conduct hybrid school committee meetings from the middle high school. On December 22nd, I worked with our IT technicians and someone from PAC, as well as the town's network administrator, to test the equipment that we had purchased to be able to conduct these meetings. The microphone setup was a significant challenge. It is not going to work the way we had hoped that it would. We do have some other options that we're looking to test relative to the audio. My own personal opinion that I expressed to the team working on this was that the audio is the most critical part. For people participating remotely, they really do need to be able to hear the conversation of all the members and presenters or public comment at the meeting, as well as our recording secretary relies on the recordings to go back and review to make sure that she captured everything for our minutes. So we want to make sure that we get the audio portion of this right, but we have two other options that we're looking to test out in the next couple of weeks. So I'll have another update for you at the next meeting. An update on our equity audit. I will be meeting with the equity process consultant next week to discuss the draft report. As soon as I have a final report on that, I'll be sharing that with the committee. An update on our family school partnership initiative. We do have a facilitated team meeting scheduled for tomorrow. And I also have a message that is also included in the newsletter that I send out to families, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware. Lunches on early release days. The waiver for non-congregate feeding has ended and will not be extended for school meals. This waiver allowed schools to serve meals in a grab-and-go manner. To clarify, our program participates in the National School Lunch Program, and in doing so, our program must be compliant with the standards set forth by the United States Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Services. The expectation for meals served is that students will be served meals given seat time to consume the meal. Normal or modified lunch service would take up most of the early release day, and it's just not feasible to conduct all of those lunch periods in an early release day. So as of December, the Lunenburg School Food Service will no longer be serving lunch on half days because we were doing a grab and go on the half days. We will, however, continue to serve breakfast on the early release days. And this is pertinent and timely information because there is an early release day coming up this month. So to some January reminders, PTO meeting at the middle high school next Monday at 7 p.m. We have the early release day for professional development for our staff on the 13th. The 13th is also National Hat Day, and the Lunenburg Primary School will be celebrating National Hat Day. So anyone in the community that wants to join in that celebration, pick your favorite hat. On the 16th, we will be observing Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and schools and offices will be closed. And our next school committee meeting will be on the 18th of January at 6:30, and that meeting will be held via Zoom.
All right, thank you very much. Question?
Yeah, I had a question in regards to the half-days. Is it possible to explore, I know some schools have done reverse half-days, where like the staff would come in the morning and then the students would come in right before lunch. That way they could get lunch in and be fed, if that is a possibility.
So if that's a primary focus, we could certainly explore that. It does diminish the academic time for the remainder of that day, though. But if it's something that the committee wants us to explore, we certainly can.
Do we know what the participation rate is for grab and go on early release days?
I don't have that figure handy. I would imagine that there are meals prepped for all of the kids. That would be my assumption, but I can verify for you.
I guess the follow-on question that I would have is, and I don't understand the mechanics of how the federal program works, but I would be curious about what the cost would be relative to the number of early release days we have in a given year. This year, we're providing lunch at no cost. I don't know that that will continue in perpetuity, but my concern is that the cost of food is high. We're seeing posts on social media about costs of food and people not being able to make ends meet and that sort of thing. A lot of kids on half days turn into latchkey kids that they wouldn't otherwise be because there aren't other things available. And it just seems to me that this could be something that, and it may not be enough time given there's 9 days between now and the next early release day, but it seems to me that this is something that we could proactively think about.
So there's potentially another option that we could explore. The nonprofit organization Bright Eyed is the one who has now picked up in Lunenburg the service that used to be provided by Kylie's Care Kits, and those are essentially to go.
True.
We could potentially work with that organization to see if through them we could be providing grab and go. Then our food service department is not providing it. We would not be in violation.
So
But
if
we
we
would
were
be
to-
servicing the kids who need it.
So just to be clear, if we were to say we're going to find, an overfunded account to pay for this through the local budget.
We're still
on-
in violation.
That would ironically put us in violation, which is ridiculous in my opinion, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, but that is another avenue that we could explore.
My thought would be that pending, that's an interesting thought, and I know that I had a very off-the-cuff conversation with someone working at Extended Day who said the children, many of them, don't eat those grab-and-goes, they just throw them out. So I don't know, I would want to know, how many people really needed them before we changed anything with this, and I would think changing something with this, particularly what Mr. Leighton had suggested, which may not be a bad idea, but involves all kinds of union issues and parents all of a sudden having the daycare upside down and I wouldn't think that's something we could do for the school year.
No, it would
I
definitely be
would think
something
it's
to
something we could
explore
talk
and-
about for next
And
year.
even administration
And,
thinking about
and
doing
see if there was something we could do, if the need for those meals,
it. Yeah, if it made sense.
if it makes sense, because obviously, I don't like the idea of any child going home and having nothing to eat. That's not good. We don't want that.
But Bright Eye does supply weekend meal kits to
Yeah.
go home.
I
To
would
the
appreciate
families
if you
that
could
do need it.
investigate and see
Yeah,
what the
if we
options
could
are.
look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's,
I'm just thinking, just realistically, if you don't have the provisions in your house to deal with an unplanned need to make lunch, your house is very much like to be my house, which is like, oh my goodness, today's a half day, I didn't realize it, right? Which, I hate to say it as a school committee member, but that's life in my world, And so because they're not a regular thing, it's not something that you can put on the third Thursday of every month is going to be, they're
Right.
very irregular. It's difficult to plan around and they creep up on you very quickly. And in that, we've now created an expectation that lunch will be provided.
Monday through
Right,
Friday.
right.
Yeah.
right, sure. Okay. All right, then we're going to go to our student representatives report. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Good to see you, Sean.
Good to see you too. I just want to start off by saying Happy New Year, everyone.
Same.
Hope you have a
New
good
Year.
2023. I'm going to start with the primary school report. Prior to school break, the primary school held a successful Spirit Week and participated in Christmas-themed activities on the Friday before break after a hard-working December. Elementary school students had some fun sledding with the snow that was left and ended off school with a fun Friday in cozy pajamas, which led into a much-needed and well-deserved Christmas break. The Lunenburg Middle School students prior to break built gingerbread houses that were displayed in the project room. The students also versed the staff in a basketball game. From what I've heard, the students won, but I don't know about that. And participated in a successful Spirit Week collaboration with the high school. High school winter sports start to kick off with a great start to the season for the boys basketball team as they won their first tournament last week and a comeback victory versus neighboring Air Shirley and another game tonight at 7 p.m. versus North Middlesex. The track team, as always, are having a standout year with a combined 6 new personal records in the last meet, which took place in Boston. The second quarter is coming to an end and the final push for grades is starting to come in these final weeks. College application season is well underway as students are racing to finish their applications and eager to hear back from their schools of choice. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good report.
We appreciate it. Okay, under new business, permission to post a chemical hygiene officer and social media administrator.
Good evening, everyone. Mike Cassett, business manager in front of the school committee tonight. Our 2 stipend positions. The first position is a social media administrator. We've identified a need, and we want to experiment on combining all school and department Facebook accounts into one single account. And our goal is to improve communication for parents and students in one centralized location. We understand that there are some other platforms, but we're trying Facebook first and trying to measure the burden on that particular person, trying to keep up to date on one platform. So that is going to be funded by the Title A grant, which is an allowable use for that position. Secondly is a chemical hygiene officer. So a district needs to have a chemical hygiene plan, and it's time for Lunenburg to open that document up again, completely revise it. And then, in addition, that person will be providing specific training to the staff that are dealing with those chemicals. So it's number one, it's looking at the current plan, updating it, and then ultimately training next year.
And the district does have to have a person designated as a chemical hygiene officer.
So there are chemicals in science rooms, custodial closets. They just need to be identified and documented in a plan.
Any questions for Mr. Cassidy? Mr. Beardmore?
I have a few. For the social media, when you say one platform or one account, would this be for, I mean, because when I think of the accounts that we have accounts for schools, we have accounts for different athletics teams, there's a lot going on there. So you really mean one account for everything? Or, because the other concern that I have is audience, right? Like if I'm a primary school parent, I'm not much concerned with how the track team is doing. So.
But if you're a parent that has children in multiple buildings, it is easier to go to one Facebook account and see what's happening. I will say that when I first arrived in the district, there was an interest in knowing what was going on in the district, not just at your child's school. So this also addresses
Is there a-
that, and honestly, I don't know to what extent we're effectively using a variety of individual accounts, because
I can tell you as a parent of an athlete, I'm very dependent on them. Like we have the apps that we use to communicate with the teams.
we're not proposing that
but-
goes away.
But, no, and let me finish the thought. We have the apps that we use for communication of practices canceled and that sort of thing. But there's also broader, more school level communication that the football team has, the track team has, so on and so forth, that in my mind, as soon as you begin to consolidate social media accounts, you also begin to consolidate the amount of communication that goes through that social media account, because on a platform like Facebook, you're dealing with algorithms. So if it's a high frequency account, chances are not everybody is going to see every post associated with that account. So I'm just concerned that this may not be fully thought out in terms of the consolidate. I understand the need, and I'm probably the biggest advocate of engagement and communication on this committee at this point, but I'm very concerned that this hasn't been fully thought out in terms of the potential ramifications of moving to a single account. And once you experiment with making that move, you're going to start losing audience on the other accounts. So I'm just offering some caution there. The other question that I have is just, can you explain a little bit more about the Title VIII grant and what it funds and its frequency, regularity? My other concern is obviously budgetary. Like if we're funding something that is not going to be funded well into the future, then I want to
Okay.
talk
So
about that.
I may have used the wrong word. It's experimental.
Okay.
It wasn't experimental within the Facebook. It's just determining if we're going to be using just one account in the future. So we're experimenting with the one account. That doesn't mean we're closing the door on looking at some of the other applications. And as far as, I know the athletic applications that are used for parents, for practices, that is not going to be on.
I understand.
So we're not taking that away. It's more used, we had visions of it, more district-wide announcements, and not necessarily specific, athletic events or that tied to specific athletes. So
Again, I don't want to confuse the issue. The agenda item is for a position to post. And maybe this is a separate issue to discuss around social media policy and how we're coming at that. Like, I understand the need for having somebody to kind of own this thing and help to administer it. I get that. But I'm very concerned that decisions are going to be made without fully understanding the broader ramifications in terms of who's looking at what social media accounts and what purpose. So there's the content and publication side, there's the audience side of this. And I'm just trying to raise a voice for the audience side. Like, let's be very careful about not losing our audience while we're trying to improve. And that's probably more of a policy question than a position question. And we're admittedly conflating these. I'm conflating these because you brought it up. Could you talk a little bit more about the grant source?
So Title I grant is a annual entitlement. It supports technology in schools. It's about an $18,000 grant that we get every single year. Once again, it's an entitlement. It has nothing to do with ESSER funds. We've been getting it since I've been in the district and many years before that. So it's a grant that is really determined about low and income students. The same formula that's used for Title IIA is used for Title I.
What do we use these funds for? I understand it's IT related, but are we buying Chromebooks or paying for network administrators or?
Many of our stipends are being paid out of that. So we've got a Chromebook, a Google administrator, a district Google administrator. We've got building-based technology support. That's being paid. Those stipends are being paid for those people. Our webmasters are going to be begin to be paid out of that grant as well. And any platform that can support technology in the classroom, we use that for.
Okay. On the chemical hygiene officer position, what line are we funding this from?
I'll make a recommendation to the school committee. It'll be a salary and wages account.
Okay.
I'll identify surplus funds and propose a transfer.
And what is the dollar value associated with both of these positions?
I think the social media,
The equivalent of a webmaster stipend.
so that would be between 2,000 to 3,000.
Okay.
Now, that would be prorated
Yeah.
for this year.
Yeah.
But moving forward, that annual rate would be about 2,000 to 3,000. Chemical hygiene officer is probably around the $1,800. That's,
I think that's
yeah.
probably.
We're trying to align it with some of the other stipends in the salary schedule, and it was about $1,800. It'll be prorated this year, and then again next year, it'll be the full amount.
Okay, and that is, I understand that this has to do with accreditation or updating a documentation that we need to have.
It's actually under OSHA regulations.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Mr. Leighton?
So just to clarify for the social media administrator post, other Facebook pages of the school, the track team and other things like that will stay the same, but there'll be a social media administrator who's running the Lunenburg Public Schools Facebook page, which from what I see, it hasn't had a post since May 1st of 2020.
Right,
And then it'll
which
be
is
more
why
active.
having somebody designated to be the go-to to handle that, if our food service department wanted to post information relative to the early release day and no grab-and-go lunch, or the menus, or if our facilities department wanted to make sure that we were announcing that the grass fields were going to be closed for restoration through the summer months, et cetera. There's one account that different departments can funnel to, have a person to go in and make sure that the post is done, make sure that they're monitoring the page on a regular basis so that things aren't going left unaddressed if there are questions that are presented through the Facebook page. So we think that we can use it more effectively if we can designate someone to oversee it.
I think that's great. I think it'll add to the communication goal of just increasing that communication with the community.
Yeah, I totally see your point, Peter, but as someone, I know you're going to be in the same boat as me, Brian, in a couple of years, we're going to have 3 kids in 3 different buildings. Like, one page is actually going to be super helpful because I miss things on the Facebook page for 2034 and 2031 constantly because there's too much to keep up with. So.
Do we, I'm looking at I'm okay with the position. I get it. I think maybe for items for future meetings, I'd like to visit social media. I'm on our policy page and we don't have a policy. I know it's in there somewhere. I know it's in there somewhere, but we don't have, there's nothing called a social media policy.
We're working on one.
In subcommittee.
Okay.
So hopefully that will get
Okay.
addressed soon.
So I have a lot of reservations here, but it's more about
The content.
how we do it, not who does it, I guess is
Yeah.
kind of where I'm hung
And that's
up.
definitely something we had talked about addressing in subcommittee, so maybe we can get together and do that and then bring it before you guys.
Okay. So do I have a motion to give Mr. Cassidy permission to post these positions?
I'll make a motion to permission to post the chemical hygiene officer position and the social media administrator position.
I just have one, I'll second it. For discussion, I just have one more question, which is, who do these positions report to? For who's responsible? Who's ultimately responsible for the performance of these positions? I mean, I know they're you.
As this would be for district communications, that would be me.
Okay, and for the chemical hygiene officer?
That would be a school-based position. So essentially, it would be located largely in the high school,
Yeah.
because that's where you're going to find the most materials that need to have that training. However, there are potential materials even in an art classroom, in custodial supply closets. So there would be certain individuals from each of the buildings that would definitely have to participate in the training. And the plan, once it's addressed, would be available in all of the school buildings. Essentially, you're identifying proper handling, protocols for spills, cleanup, who is the designee for different types of things, but largely this pertains to lab classrooms, largely.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation. What I'm getting to is who has supervisory responsibility for these roles?
If it would make you feel better, I can have that responsibility because I was a science teacher and I wrote a chemical hygiene plan.
There's a larger and a smaller point to be made here. The larger point is that we have a lot of stipended positions. I requested from Mr. Cassidy today a list that he had produced a couple of years ago just to kind of remind me. There's a lot of them, and they're small numbers, but they add up. And when we get into difficult budget years, we're going to be looking at stipended positions. There's just no two ways about it. And so I'm trying to be conscious about making sure that we're getting our money's worth for these things, and that there is somebody accountable beyond the person who's going to do the work.
So the accountability comes in that these are posted annually, and if somebody is not doing a satisfactory job in any given stipended role any given year, they would not be reappointed to the stipended role in the following year.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, for this particular initial post here, somebody's going to have to be successful because the plan, the existing plan is not satisfactory. It needs to be updated in a significant way. A training module needs to be either selected or developed. There are trainings out there, it's not.
Yeah.
So there is some work to be done, and it needs to be done, and it's important to me that it's done. So this year in particular, I will be paying very close attention to having this work done.
So when I asked the question, I half expected you to tell me that it was going to be a facilities-related role, but just not knowing a lot about it. So I appreciate the explanation.
It really is driven more around safety in the laboratory setting.
Okay.
So it does, there will be components that may apply to an art classroom that may have solvents, address cataloging and identifying MSDS sheets for the different materials that custodians have in stock in the buildings and are in use, because any employee should have access to know exactly what is in the building and, the details around each of those things. So there will be some spillover, but the primary major focus of this really is about the science labs.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm good.
Okay.
Those are my comments.
Then
Questions?
are we ready to take a vote? So do we?
We do a roll call vote?
Is Tony in?
He has joined.
All right. Hello, Mr. Schoenbrini.
Hello, I clicked on the wrong agenda.
Well, that's all right.
Sorry.
We found you, or you
Thank you.
found us, whichever. Then it would be a roll call vote to approve this permission to post.
Mr. Schoolambrini,
I'm going to abstain because I came in at the end.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Leighton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Archambault.
Yes. All right, next we have the personnel report.
Good evening, everyone. Mike Cassidy again. In front of the school committee is an update on our personnel moves within the district. At the time of the memorandum, we did not have any retirements announced yet. Two notable resignations since the last report was Carolyn Brahman, who was a part-time CAF worker for the Lunenburg Primary School for 15 years. She moved out of town. So I want to thank her for her service. And Katie McGuire, I think everyone was aware of her resignation. She had been with us for 7 years and was the COVID contact person for many families and staff members. So thank you. And then there's just a number of new hires listed after that.
Thank you very much. We see there are many new hires on the list, and we welcome them. Any questions for Mr. Cassidy? Then, do we have a motion to accept the personnel report?
I'll make a motion to accept the personnel report.
Second?
And a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Schoolambrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Archambault.
Yes. Thank you very much. Now we have substitute nurse position increase.
Good evening, everyone. Mike Cassidy again. I think sorry, wrong file. In front of you tonight is a proposed increase for our substitute nurses in the Lunenburg Public Schools. They're currently paid $130 per day. There's been some urgency. We are not being able to fill our nursing positions. And we suspect that it's two things. Number one, our rate is too low compared to other districts. And secondly, there is a nurse shortage in the state as well. So the dynamic is that the hospitals have actually increased their daily rate of pay for nurses to recruit them. And so that's really impacting the group that we normally recruit. And then once we do have that small group to recruit, they can go to another district for a little bit more money. Presented tonight is some similar or surrounding towns and their rates. Kind of an expanded search. And some of these are, just really very high. And then we did a statewide inventory, and there was one small city at 165 and a larger city at 325. Obviously, that's not what we're proposing here. So the nurses are in the nurses are in the area with the number of hospitals in and around the Lunenburg, Fitchburg area. It's I'm proposing a rate of $200 a day as a way to recruit some of the school nurses. So let's talk about absences. Our school nurses are excellent and are not sick leave abusers. They are fantastic. They show up every day. They do go out to trainings from time to time, and they're very thoughtful. In those days, they usually take like they kind of schedule for a half a day. So we would be hiring a nurse to cover the other half of the day. So they work with us as far as the absences go, and they have excellent attendance. I can't necessarily predict the impact of the budget, but I know it hasn't been an issue. Nurses have not been an issue as far as absenteeism. It's noteworthy to say, it's not in the memorandum, is that we do have that Department of Public Health grant, and some of that money it can be used for substitutes to do testing for students and get updated with some of the tests that are required. So a lot of that, there'll be an increase in the use at this rate, but it'll be applied to a grant. And that grant goes away June 30th. So for your consideration, I'm proposing an increase of $200 a day for nurse substitutes from $130 per day.
Any questions? No? All right. Then, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the request from the District Business and Human Resources Director to raise the per diem rate for substitute nurses to $200 per day.
A second.
All right, then a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schoenbrini?
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Leighton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ashambo?
Yes,
Thank you, everyone.
thank you. Donations is next on the docket.
We have several this evening. We have a donation in the amount of $1,250 from the Lunenburg PTO that would be deposited into the primary school gift account. A check in the amount of $426 from Hannaford Helps also would be donated into the primary school gift account. A check in the amount of $2,464.12 from the PTO from the Fall Scholastic Book Fair, which would be deposited into the primary school gift account. And a check in the amount of $864 from Heather L. McConnelly, Usborne Books and More. These are the proceeds from the book fair at Turkey Hill, and they will be deposited into the gift account and earmarked for library, school library at Turkey Hill.
Okay. I'd like to thank them all for all the generous donations, and thank the people involved in the book fairs to get all that together, because I know that's quite a to-do. And is there a motion to accept these gifts, please?
Make a motion to accept the donations with gratitude.
A second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Schoenbrini?
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Leighton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Ashambo?
Yes. Thank you. Now we're on to the proposed FY24 budget.
Hi, everyone. Mike Cassidy, Business Manager.
We'll
I
be
just want
working in
to say
tandem.
publicly,
We'll be working in tandem tonight.
just want to say publicly that the slides that are being presented tonight will be on our website. So you feel free to public can take notes, but this information will be readily available.
It's already posted. So every year when we make this presentation, we're sure to include our mission statement and our vision, because this does get to the crux of the work that the budget should be supporting. We also include, for the benefit of anybody who's looking at this presentation later, the areas, the large objectives of our strategy for continuous improvement in the areas of transforming teaching and learning, cultivating climate and culture, communication and operations, and equity, access, opportunity, and achievement for all students. Annually, we also like to provide some data that provides some context, hopefully that helps folks understand some of our decision-making. You'll note that I've updated this slide that overviews the state mandates and reporting requirements since 2010. We know that there have been some changes to the discipline law that are going to require some additional documentation around progressive discipline. We're still waiting for some of that guidance from the Department of Education as to what changes, if any, districts will need to make in order to satisfy this particular change. We have been told that we will see that guidance coming this month. We always include student enrollment numbers and what we anticipate for the next fiscal year.
Forgive me, I had to let somebody in. And it,
We also provide you data on class sizes, and while this does say 21, 22, these are the most current numbers for this school year, so we'll change the dates and the heading on that slide and repost for the public.
There's no anticipated changes to these numbers.
We've been able to manage class sizes, generally speaking, in this range consistently during my tenure here. We were able to do that and maintain those numbers at the primary school based on kindergarten enrollment being lower than typical this year. We reassigned a kindergarten teacher to the first grade, which reduced the first grade class sizes, which really puts them in range and comparable with other elementary level and primary school grades. We'd like to give you an update on the homeschool students. We had indicated during the COVID years that we saw a good number of our students opt for homeschooling due to concerns around COVID and exposure, et cetera. But we are seeing those students over the last 2 years returning. We also, note that there are some students who have been homeschooled, who have moved out of district and would no longer be on our watch to ensure that the students are being homeschooled when they are residents of Lunenburg. But, and we're still working to secure plans, homeschool plans for families who historically have been on homeschool plans, but they have not yet submitted the documentation. So that has been a rather significant effort this year to track down families. It's possible, potentially, that some of these families have moved out of town as well, but we need to get to that. So we're still working to clarify status with 23 students in different
Can I
families.
just add a comment? So this slide really doesn't add up. Okay. So we started with 71, 22 students returned to the district, 10 students moved out. We still have 41 students with approved plans, and we're working with 23. So really, the number is 64 students are being homeschooled.
Who, out of curiosity, who deals with the homeschool curriculum approvals and plans, and how
So
does,
there's a process. Home school plans are submitted to the superintendent's office. We then forward them to the appropriate principal. The principal looks at the proposed curriculum. We need to ensure that, it's meeting essentially the state requirements. Once they review that and deem that it is appropriate and comparable to the curriculum that we would be providing in terms of ensuring that content areas are covered, not necessarily a curriculum that would be equal to the curriculum that we teach in the classroom. And then once the principals sign off, those plans then come to me to review and sign off. And then all of that communication obviously goes in and out from my office, so Ms. Peterson is
okay.
largely the contact person for all these families.
And is there any kind of enforcement, or if somebody is known to be not in compliance, hasn't submitted
So
a
the law
plan?
is interesting, and we there are some limitations as to school department oversight of it. I mean, essentially, any of these students who are homeschooled living in Lunenburg are not Lunenburg Public School students. It's our job to track these students for the state, essentially,
Right.
and ensure that they are captured somewhere for the state.
So the state's responsible ultimately for enforcement?
I think it's best answered that it's kind of a partnership. They rely on us to do the legwork to make sure, to the best of our ability. I mean, it's possible that somebody moved into town and
You don't know?
has always been homeschooled elsewhere, and we don't know when they move into town, or that we should be, anticipating a homeschool plan from them. But clearly, anybody who's been in our process before, if they're not registered to return to Lunenburg Public Schools, we're anticipating and looking for their homeschool plan. But it can be, and this year it's definitely proving to be, a significant task to either verify that folks are still living in Lunenburg, they are homeschooling their children, they have been executing a plan, they just have not submitted it, versus we haven't gotten a plan because these folks are no longer in Lunenburg, but we need to verify that too. So,
Thank you.
we always include these slides just for the comprehension, a comprehensive presentation for, the public that may look to review these slides later. We already had a presentation of the MCAS data earlier this fall, this general overview as well as school-based, deeper look at school-level data. So I won't spend time reviewing any of that, but this data does support the notion that we have identified need, academic need, for students here in Lunenburg Public Schools. As you know, we don't limit our examination of student need to MCAS results alone. We are using a variety of assessments, and we've discussed those at prior school committee meetings. You know that we have our iReady assessment that we're doing K through 8 for literacy and for math. We're now entering that time period where we will begin the winter benchmarks for those assessments. So you can anticipate an update on that in the coming meetings. And of course, we always provide an end-of-year report when we do the final benchmark for the year. We also give you some insight as to other types of need, in special education data. We take a look at the number of students on IEPs. Part of the process in having an IEP developed is an evaluation process. Multiple types of tests are conducted by a variety of staff in the district, sometimes special education teachers, it might be a school psychologist, it might be a BCBA, behavior analyst, it might be an occupational therapist, speech language path. Like, there are any number of tests that are potentially part and parcel of an evaluation for one student. Not all students go through a battery involving all of those tests, but it just speaks to the volume of students and the workload for the staff that are doing the evaluations. We've been holding pretty steady around that 230 mark with students on IEPs. And we've got the pending reevaluations that are required to be done every 3 years, as well as the evaluations that have been completed since school opened this year. We also provide you information relative to the number of students in each school who are on a Section 504 plan. This type of a plan outlines necessary accommodations to meet students' needs. Oftentimes, students may require some specific types of accommodations in the classroom, but does not rise to the level of need of specialized instruction and requiring an IEP. I don't want to convey that there's a, if you don't get this, then you get this. That is not the case. But this kind of plan provides an outline for teachers as to what specific students require to be successful in accessing the curriculum. And we should see these numbers over the next couple of years. We're already starting to see some decrease in numbers. We're hopeful that with a more rigorous intervention model, MTSS model, and a student support team model to determine the need for intervention for kiddos, that the default won't be, we need to put my child on a 504 plan. Because honestly, a 504 plan is accommodations that are given in special education, general education settings. And they can be provided without a 504 plan being written, and they should be. So we're working in that direction. We also have been, for the last couple of years, providing you some behavioral health data. You can see the number of referrals thus far this year by school. And we've also provided the number of referrals for each of these schools for last year as a point of comparison. And you know that we have adopted a Tier 1 curriculum, so we're, again, working to support behavioral health needs across the board. The next slide gives you some data on the current caseloads of our professional health staff. These are the number of students being serviced in either Tier 2 or Tier 3 in our schools.
Were these numbers tracked pre-COVID?
We didn't have this staff pre-COVID.
I understand that, but we had cases that required social work or special attention of guidance counselors or that kind of thing. I'm just wondering if there's a means of comparison.
No.
Okay.
We had one social worker in the district. We had no, we've come a long way in terms of identifying processes, making sure that they're consistent across all buildings, making sure that similar documentation is occurring in all buildings. The structures and procedures were not in place prior. So even if I could pull data together for you, it would be a very incomplete picture, and we would be talking about crisis level, the most significant crisis level information, not a broader picture.
It's the reason why I raise this is because, you know, as we talked about at our previous meeting, when we look at ESSER funding for a lot of these roles, as we look forward, not necessarily for this budget year, but for next, I think we all believe that the need is greater today than it was 3 years ago. But when you look at these numbers and the answer that you just gave me, you really can't do a like analysis, right? It's completely apples, oranges.
But this data we will have available for the years that we had ESSER funding. And these numbers alone speak to the need. Comparable to prior to COVID or not, it really is, in my mind, irrelevant. The need, this is the current need.
I agree with you on the need. I do think that the comparison is relevant because somebody who would believe, and I'm not saying I believe this, but I'm projecting discussions that will likely happen in the out years, is a teacher versus a social worker. You say you have 73 cases at the primary school. I say you would have had those in 2018. You just didn't know it.
Or they weren't receiving services.
Right, exactly. Which, you know, to your point, I understand your point around need, but the problem is that when you have $1 and you got to spend it somewhere, that becomes the discussion. And it's unfortunate, but I think we got to begin to wrap our head around some of these issues. So again, it's not.
Yeah.
I'm not casting any judgment. I'm just.
Yeah, we
saying
don't
that
have
these are
apples
tough
to
problems
apples
to deal
data
with.
pre-COVID.
So the next slide talks about Chapter 70 funding over the last 5 years. And the portion of Chapter 70 that supports the local budget. It's been between 36 and 37% over the last 4 years. There was a dramatic increase in what Lunenburg received last year. So it offset the local budget a little bit more. I'll I'll go on the record to say I'm anticipating not receiving that level of increase that we received last year, again. And I think it's important to note that we did get into another category, another level of need, and that's why we got that little bump. And it's going to take a while for us to get to that next level.
However, the additional funding we did get doesn't disappear. It stays. That 8,722,000 is now the base.
It's now the base.
Yeah. So to round this out, for those of you who may not have been paying attention for years that we've been dealing with Chapter 70, when you don't find yourself in another category and you can't support a substantial increase, there's a hold harmless nominal increase that you'll get on a per student basis, and it's, I think, single digits or low double digits.
$100 a child.
Is it that much? Okay, it's more
It
than
was
I-
raised this year.
Okay.
It's $100 a child.
which is great. That's good news.
Better than
Better than it
nothing.
was. One suggestion on this is, I think that this slide, when we get to finance committee and town manager discussions, that we need to put dollar amounts around local versus Chapter 70 funds. Because the subtle point here is that we're running on fewer local dollars this year than we were last year. And I think that point needs to be spelled out as we move forward.
Okay.
I agree.
The next slide identifies our current grants. And the grants that are identified in red are expire at the end of this fiscal year. The Child Home Program, that is in conjunction with the Family and Community Grant. That was a $27,000 grant. The Workforce Investment Program, that's the Department of Health grant that I was speaking about before. And we do get another $30,000 from DPH for supplies and equipment. That is almost an entitlement. But that has been, for years, we got $10,000. And then as soon as COVID hit, it was bumped up to 30. I can't tell you if it's going to be level funded at 30 moving forward, but we should get that entitlement again next year. Listed are the federal grants, those federal entitlements that we get year after year based upon our student population from the federal government through DESE. And then we're down to 3 COVID grants. So that's ESSER 2. ESSER 2 is expiring September 30th, 2023, not June 30th. So, but I anticipate will be most of that money is going to be spent before June 30th. ESSER funds, ESSER 3 funds, and then we did receive another grant for our after-school program for $87,000. So that is currently what we are working on.
And there's another grant that we're pursuing, so we're always looking.
Do you want to?
So annually, we try to make clear that when we're developing a budget, our priorities around what do we need to meet student need and further our strategy for continuous improvement for the district, which, if you connect back to it, it really focuses on making sure that the kids have what they need to be successful. And our process really hasn't deviated. We begin this work in August, we review the strategy for continuous improvement. We look at the data that we have from the year previous. We look at the progress on actions, and then try to assess what adjustments, if any, need to be made to the strategy, the action plans in the strategy, et cetera. And then that takes us to the fall, into November, when department leaders and building administrators submit their budget requests for the following year. They are also advised that the priorities need to be focused around meeting student need and the work of the strategy for continuous improvement. We review the proposals that come in, the requests that come in, and then, we start to work together as a team to look at requests and priorities, and that leads right into our work in terms of revising the 5-year staffing plan. And as you know, that year one of a newly revised 5-year staffing plan informs the community what we're thinking are the most important priorities as we start to consider the budget for the following year. So that next slide is just a revisit to the December presentation of the 5-year staffing plan. This was year one, this is FY24, and these were the positions that we presented back in December.
May I?
Sure.
Okay. So we'd like to present our proposed FY24 budget to the school committee. At this time, we are proposing a 3.1% increase. The breakdown is a 1.6% increase to our salary and wages account, or our personnel account, and then almost a 7% increase to our non-personnel, or our expense account. So what does that budget include? So it's including level funding for Chapter 70 funds. It includes all contractual increases, and when I say that, that includes step increases, longevity payments, degree advancements. Unfortunately, it's budgeted at an 8% increase on health insurance. That is the number that the town manager gave us to use for budgeting purposes. It also includes our general education transportation increase and the proposed positions, which we'll present shortly. So some offset positions. So these are, we started introducing this, I believe it was last year. Within our budget, we are finding funds to support other positions. So we are looking to bring back a network administrator, and we're looking to move away from our consulting services. The second position, which we are contemplating, which is a behavioral health coordinator. We currently have 5 social workers in the district, and we're looking to reassign one of those positions to a leadership position. So that is what we are contemplating right now. That position would have to be posted, by the way.
I wondered, just thinking out loud here, we have a lot of department heads in a lot of the departments, like math, English, whatever. Could it be a potential department head position where it's a department head of the...
We've been working under that model where it's a stipended position, and we've worked pretty hard to encourage our current staff to consider taking on that stipended function. And we have not had good luck with getting any of our current staff to take on a stipended added responsibility. But it's a necessary component for us, absolutely. We are definitely feeling the lack of having that designated leader in the behavioral health realm. And that's why we're feeling we need to repurpose, if you will, one of the 5 social worker adjustment counselor FTEs as a designated leadership role. I think when you post it too, and it's more of an administrative role, you get experienced people who have been school social workers for a number of years looking to move into a leadership role. We have potentially different applicants when you post this position. This is the position that our social worker, Jamie Millett, who had been filling the function of behavioral health coordinator as a stipended role, left the district to pursue and take on an administrative role.
So would you see it as a administrative role, or is it still a teacher contracted role
So
too?
there would still be a need for some case management with this role. But we're potentially talking about the capacity for this individual to contribute to evaluation of these staff because they have the expert background, which would be a huge benefit. Additionally, if they can take the lead on evaluating some of our behavioral health staff, that takes folks off of each of the building administrators' evaluation caseload, which then means that they can spend more time in the evaluation process ongoing year-long with the people that they do evaluate.
So currently, these social workers report to the principals?
Yes.
Can I just add one thing? We have had preliminary conversations that it's a school year position.
Right.
Maybe a few days before, a few days after. But it's not another central office position that we're creating. It's really going to be a school-based position working school year.
But it seems more of an administrative role than a
Yes.
teacher role.
And
Administrative position.
that was one of the challenges that was communicated to us with the position of behavioral health coordinator as just a stipended peer. Trying to require people to be timely with inputting their data and making sure that they were tracking data, et cetera, et cetera. It's different when you get that message and request from an administrator as opposed to a colleague, peer.
Sorry, can you just leave that previous slide up? The IT consulting service, that's the consulting service that we share with the town.
We don't share it. We have our own contract with that consulting service. The
But it's the
town
same-
also has
it's the same vendor.
It's the same vendor.
Currently, okay. So one of the, and this is a conversation for another day, probably not meeting time, but I'm very concerned about, there's a whole compliance piece and expertise piece that comes with a consulting service that we get, where when you hire an employee that's a network administrator, is one person going to bring that that full freight of value or not, and continuity and those kinds of things. The problem that I perceive is that we have not properly compensated these roles in the past. They've been high turnover. We've hired underqualified people, and we've gotten ourselves in a lurch when it comes to things like security and maintenance and those kinds of issues. And network administration is not your skill set, nor really anybody in government, and therefore we tend not to make the best hiring decisions. And I have reservation, I understand the shortcomings that you've expressed to me in the past about our current vendor, but I have reservations about reverting back to what we've had previously.
Well, I can tell you that I have worked with a crackerjack IT director who understands schools and the needs of schools and knows network administration, knows current application, knows what's consistent with where we're headed as a district. So I have seen that model. I know what I'm looking for. Whether or not we'll be able to find one person to bring all of that to the table, we don't know. But I can tell you that if there are areas of expertise that this individual cannot deliver on, we always have the capability to contract a consultant for specific smaller work. But I can tell you that this model of contracting, and this was a model that was presented by this vendor. We can be your IT director. I need an IT director who's going to attend our leadership meetings. I need an IT director to listen to different department leaders or teachers to understand what our needs are and where we want to go, communication applications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The current model that we have, I don't have an IT director for Lunenburg Public Schools.
Mm-hmm.
I need somebody here every day, participating in the ongoing conversations about what our needs are and exploring. I can tell you that our IT technicians have been fantastic. When there's something that I need, a niche, a gap, or something, I can ask them to go and research and find me information on options, and they do a fantastic job. I need somebody who has that capacity with network administration. Maybe we won't find the perfect individual, but I can tell you that the model we have right now is not working. Not working.
I understand the shortcomings. I understand exactly what you're saying. The problem is you don't know what you don't know. And that's
Right.
exactly the
But
problem.
I know
that-
people who know what I
But-
need to know.
But that's exactly the problem that we ran into over the course of the last couple of years. And, I think we can say it publicly now. We had terribly outdated equipment all over the place that represented what could have been a devastating security problem.
Mm-hmm.
And those kinds of issues are only getting more complex as we move all of our services to the cloud while still relying on a local network. And I think it's something we're gonna have to talk through, but I have a lot of reservations on this topic. And it, by the way, probably requires more money to fix than we're currently spending. But I think we're gonna have to talk this through a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so getting back to the year one positions, we are proposing that 2 new positions are budgeted with local funds next school year. The first position, which was identified in that capital plan year one, is a humanities teacher at Lunenburg High School. And then secondarily, an enrollment secretary, which will be a district position. So the humanities teacher will ultimately reduce some class sizes in our college prep classes, as well as meet the needs of some of our struggling high school students. 2 of our high school staff members shared between the history and English department. Each teach 3 English classes and 2 history classes. So in keeping with the class sizes low, the ELA essentials, the ELA class sizes have increased dramatically. So this new position will reduce class sizes and make an impact in the classroom. Hope I did a good job explaining that. Probably
If not,
not.
Mr. Santry's on the meeting, so he can answer some questions.
So next position is an enrollment secretary. So we look at this position to be another school year position with some additional days during the summer. And it's scheduling all special ed meetings for each school. Currently, we have a process coordinator in every school. So we'll be
stipend
taking those clerical duties back to a secretarial role. It'll be a point of contact for new families coming into the district, and they'll be handling the annual kindergarten enrollment, which would be a huge relief for the primary school staff. And when I say staff, secretarial staff and main office staff, which is pretty busy. There'll be some communication between, this person will be handling the communication between, with the parents and bus companies, or the bus company. And like I said, as I mentioned before, it'll give hours back to our school secretaries to do some additional work. So the positions that were not funded in the local budget. So one instructional position was the targeted math position at the high school. We are proposing that position is funded with ESSER 3 funds next school year. Other unfunded service and support staff position is a psychologist at the primary school, which we're shifting funding for that position under the 240 grant. The Tier 1 SEL counselor, or guidance counselor at the primary school, we're recommending that being funded with ESSER 3 funding. And an LPN, we're still holding out hope that'll be supported by a new COVID grant, or continuing the COVID grant. And if not, we'll be seeking alternative funding. I made a reference that we would be, we're recommending that some of these positions are funded with ESSER funds. That'll be presented to the school committee at a different time, not tonight. It will be at a meeting in February. So I'll demonstrate that the funding is there. And those positions certainly meet the requirements of ESSER 3. The next slide is basically that year one of the 5-year staffing plan, and in identifying some of the funding sources that I just spoke about. One of the positions that is completely off the table right now is the dean position at the high school. And I think the superintendent mentioned that the requirements for that position, or the requirements of the districts, for districts, will be coming out shortly. And at that point, we'll have to reconsider what that looks like. We're really hoping that it's a stipend position. Well, we have some ideas, but we want to see what the state has to say first.
Have there been any further discussions that you've been privy to with DESE, conference calls or that sort of thing on this topic, or are we just waiting for a document from DESE on this?
The last conference call was that guidance would be coming in January,
Okay.
which was the same information that was provided on the previous conference call. So I guess we're in January.
Right.
I don't have a ballpark as to whether that's early, mid, or late January. But they did indicate January.
It just strikes me, and these are unrelated topics, but we're in the midst of a court case over Lunenburg's representation in the legislature. And one of the claims is an unfunded mandate when it comes to validating absentee ballots using signatures, because the state required something and then didn't fund the requirement. And here we are again with yet another unfunded mandate from the legislature that, you know, ought to come with guidance and money if the guidance is going to cost us anything. And I suspect that it will.
Welcome
with
to public
costs, not with money.
education.
There's a million of them.
Well, going back to one of the first slides, we
Yeah, I was gonna say,
identified
slide number
all the
2,
little
3.
things
Yeah,
that we
yeah.
have to do.
5,
And
yeah, 5.
and a lot of those are unfunded mandates. It's the reporting and.
Requiring
it's-
man-hours,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, the next slide is a breakdown, it's a budget summary. It starts with our FY '23 budget. Increased costs from staffing, which is $146,036. Increase for the two new positions are at budgeted at a cost of $86,914. There's a salary reserve, and then the increase to our expense account. And that's how we came up with the $23,016,788 FY '24 budget. So the unknowns. Truly, it's our intent to get that budget down to 2.5%, on or around 2.5%. We still have some cutting to do, but we're really hoping that the health insurance percentage comes in a lot less, or a little less than 8%. We're holding out possibilities that some of our COVID grants are going to continue, and that might offset some of the budgeted expenses, specifically some of our curriculum. Here's something that continues to show up in my emails, which is the governor's budget isn't coming out till March. So how that affects the allocation of Chapter 70, what the town is going to get, how that would we're going to meet with the town manager to kind of present back to you how that's going to work. And needless to say, that budget ordinarily needs to be submitted by the end of January, but because we have a new governor, that time has been extended. Circuit breaker costs likely will be same level funded at 65% of the costs, if they carry enough money in the state budget. We are anticipating state and federal grants, the title grants, our special education grants, to be at least level funded. Right? And we're not going to know those amounts until the middle of summer. We had set aside earlier a salary reserve. We have two non-bargaining unit contracts, so employee contracts that we have to negotiate. In addition, we'll begin negotiating with the Lunenburg Custodial Union and the Cafeteria Union within the next couple of months. So that's what the set aside is. That $25,000. And then unofficially, we got word from the Operational Service Division, which is OSD, that there's potentially a 14% increase to private school tuitions for our out-of-district students. that is a projected inflationary rate that may be forthcoming. So we're waiting to hear and finalize that. That will start on July 1st.
Are those tuitions governed by anybody other than the institutions themselves?
The state bargains those rates. The OSD will bargain those rates with those groups it's more or less a state bid list.
Okay.
It's the rate that the districts will use. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, next steps. So we're planning a meeting with the town manager to discuss the budget, health insurance, state funding. Shortly, we'll be beginning to do Zoom meetings with staff. We have a strategy of having 3 meetings. Q&A, will we be doing a Q&A next meeting?
I don't know what the wish of the body is, where we're presenting earlier than typical. It might,
Maybe just a discussion within the group to ask questions, and then the Q&A at the first meeting in February. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Just to keep it the way it normally is. So we could have like a discussion just amongst, because I won't be here next time.
So,
If anybody had specific questions.
Yeah. And ordinarily, we report any information
If there's
that
any
might
change.
help
Yeah.
move the budget along, or the discussion. So there'll be Q&A sessions at the February school committee meetings and the first school committee meeting in March. Finally, the school committee will be voting on a final budget on March 15th. And the following night, that budget will be discussed and presented to the Finance Committee for their adoption for the town meeting on May 6th. The next step is I'll turn it over to the chair if there's any questions. If Dr. Burnham, I don't know if you have any final,
Do you have anything else you
any
want to say?
points you want to make that I may have overlooked?
no, I think that there might be some challenges this year that we haven't had to navigate, where the governor's budget is coming out
Yeah.
so late. The town manager even suggested that we may not know the health insurance increase definitively until very late February, maybe even early March. So we'll see. Usually we have updates along the way where we have
Right.
numbers that are now known, and then we can advise you based on that information how that might change what we're recommending or what that bottom line percentage increase might be. And as Mr. Cassidy had already indicated, given that we've been asked to budget with 8% as the health insurance rate, and hopeful that we see a trend similar to the last handful of years where we're budgeting at this rate, but it comes in a good bit lower than what we've budgeted, we're hopeful that if that trend holds here, that this budget might actually be in that 2.5 zone. Which is why we brought it forward as it is, even though it's currently projected at a 3.1%. But we're hoping that as things fall into place, it might land closer to that 2.5.
Has the town manager indicated that 8%, typically she budgets very conservatively, which is one of the reasons why we have that trend? Has she indicated that that's a conservative number, or?
She, I could be mistaken, but my impression is that she gets that guidance from somebody at the insurance.
From the health insurance consultants or whatever they are. So it's the same source as in the past.
So it will not exceed 8%.
Right.
That's the highest it'll be.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the essence of my question is that the top end number?
That's the top end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, we're planning level funding for Chapter 70, but, sometimes the governor's budget comes in, and there might be additional monies allocated. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have, and we're not going to have the benefit of what will be the priorities and the insight for the new governor's budget priorities until it's very late in our cycle. So there may be some challenges. There may not be the typical updates that we bring on a rolling basis throughout this next couple of months. We may not have much new information to share over the next 4 or 5 or more weeks.
No, but I think it's important to still have the information out to the public so they can really focus on, I think they're going to focus on more of the positions than the dollar.
Which, I don't want to cast a negative light on this, but I'll do it just for the purposes of discussion. In the event that things do not go well and that number is 8%, or the Chapter 70 number is lower than we anticipate, or whatever, right? Like bad things happen and they happen late. We could easily find ourselves behind an 8 ball where we've got to make difficult decisions in a very compressed period of time. And my reason for illustrating that is, would your expectation be that you wouldn't fund some of the newer proposed positions versus cutting existing positions? Or, I mean, I hate to put you, and I don't expect an answer today, but I think that that's the type of guidance that we, as well as I think the public, would want to know in advance.
Yep.
So that we're not like, oh my God, never thought she'd want to cut such and such, right? Like that, I'd like to avoid that.
As would I.
I'm sure.
I think generally speaking, the way we, and Mr. Cassidy, you can jump in here, the way that we would sort of look at this, and it really is going to come down to, well, how big a gap are we looking to close? I think initially we'd look to see if there's a way to cut back on some of the expense portions of the budget. Then we're looking at positions that we've put up as new positions. My sense is, and again, I'm not making a commitment to this right here, but my sense is that I don't have anything in my mind that I would be looking to as a go-to to cut a position in order to have a position amongst the new positions that would be locally funded. Now, that said, when we get to that point, largely the new position, I think that the academic position that takes priority is that additional teaching position at the high school. Now, if Mr. Santry has a thought as to, I really need that for these reasons, and it's the best thing for kids, and I would prefer to, sacrifice this in order to have this, that's absolutely a conversation that we will have as a team. In previous years, there was so much need, right, for so many positions. Looking at the current positions, and is the need for the current positions equal to or greater than the need for the positions that we're identifying that we want to be able to add? That's I don't feel that that's the scenario that we're going to be looking at this point, because with ESSER funds and with some real deliberate planning and so forth, we have been able to bring in many of those needed positions. You know, we may get to a conversation around, you know, we did put in this year the athletic trainer position. That's not an academic position per se. But I will say, after the events of the past weekend at the pro level, I'm pretty glad that we have an athletic trainer.
As am I.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it's also a compliance issue. We have to have him, but.
We have not yet been told that we
Yeah, I know,
have to have it.
but we're on the cusp.
But you know, for the overall safety and wellness of the kids, I think.
Yep, and he's worth his weight in gold. I've interacted with
Been
him
a
as
great
has my
addition.
kid, and he's been a great addition to
Yep,
this.
brings a lot to the table. We're able to expand, you know, we're even having conversations with the ACE teacher, and potentially involving our trainer to come over and work with our students in the ACE program to develop exercise routines for them.
Oh, that'd be great.
You know, so, yeah, he's been a really nice addition to the staff. So I'm not suggesting that you know, that's a go-to, but that is potentially a conversation for academic benefit versus all-around well-being benefit to a subset of our student population. Those conversations are always difficult, but right now that's my thinking. We would look at the expense side first. We would then look at those new positions again. But I feel that we're in a very different place than we were when I first came into the district, where there was so much identified need. You know, could we delay hiring of this teacher if need be another year without causing a significant negative impact? Yeah, but that just delays our ability to better meet the needs, particularly of struggling students. So.
I just wanted to comment that with the amount of inflation that has been rampant, I think you did a great job with the non-personnel section of the program. Because, I mean, if they're talking about a 14% increase in out-of-district school placement, and you came up with 3.1 here, I think that's quite amazing with all this inflation running on. And I know that the town obviously is going to struggle with inflation in their budget as well. I mean, it's not just us
Right.
with that problem, but I think absolutely reasonable numbers. And we're just going to have to wait and see how how things turn out. You know, we don't know. And everything coming out so very late, I don't know what that does to the town manager's budget and town meeting and making sure everything is done in enough time. I don't know what happens with that. I'm glad it's not my job. I would say that. So, is there anything else anybody wants to say about budget right now? Mr. Schoenbrini, we haven't heard from you. Is there anything you wanted to say?
I was just curious as to what number of the 4 expiring grants from that slide that Mr. Cassidy put up with the red bolded grants, which of those 4 that are expiring can't be renewed? Just so I have a sense of like how the grant
Just the
funding
yes or
works.
2, I think. He's looking.
So I just want to be clear that you're looking for information on what grants are expiring at the end of
cannot be
next year.
renewed.
Yeah,
So-
you had a
was in
slide,
red.
it was a really good slide breaking down where all the grants
This
came
one?
from. and there were 4
18.
grants that you had highlighted
18.
in bold red letters that indicate, yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Which one of those can't be renewed?
Maybe that was an error.
Whoops, sorry about that. The 5 federal grants are entitlement grants, so they will be renewed.
Okay,
Once again, we apply every year for the Family and Community Grant. That grant is inconsistent. I mean, the funding is very, very consistent, but there's always a possibility that that program could be cut. But we apply, it's not an entitlement, but we do apply, it's competitive, and we get our application in. The Child Home Program, that is an outreach program through the Family and Community Program. I think that's a one-shot deal.
It is, it's for this year.
Yeah. The workforce investment, that is funding our nurses. That grant is going away. That's COVID funds through the Department of Public Health. That, and then the school health grant, the $30,000 grant, I'm betting that will be reduced back to our typical entitlement, which is about $10,000. Going over to ongoing COVID grants, the ESSER 2 grant is expiring at the end of next year. And I think I alluded that FY23. It ends in FY23. It actually goes through September of 23. But it's not going to be sustainable to carry salaries through the summer and the beginning of the school year. So that grant is going away. I haven't seen any notification that additional money is coming to support any of those ESSER grants.
In my inquiries with the Mass Association of School Superintendents, they are not currently advocating for new funding sources to replace the expiring funding sources. What they're advocating for is an extension of the deadline, which at this late hour, in the multi-year grant, when we've developed a plan to expend the funds by the deadline, much of that grant has been committed to salaries. There may be some monies that we can carry if they decide they're extending the deadline beyond September 30th of '23, but I don't foresee us having enough money to fund positions. And even if we could fund positions, we would definitely have to be funding positions that meet the priorities of the grant. So in other words, hiring the secretary for enrollment and process coordinator function, it may not be an allowable expense under that grant. Again, I am not getting any information, nor is Mr. Cassidy through his Massachusetts School Business Officials organization. We're not getting any information that new funds are coming to replace these as they are expiring. They're coming to a close.
Yeah. So pre-COVID, we had that, the one state grant, Family and Community Grant, and then we had the 5 federal entitlement. There's a possibility 2 years from now, that's all we're going to have.
Right.
We're going to go back to the pre-COVID entitlement amounts.
Right.
Or grants.
There may be additional grants coming from the Department of Education for high-quality curriculum materials or some of their evidence-based priorities that they wanted all of the Student Opportunity Act plans to be designed around. They may have some pockets of money that they allocate for those priorities, but funds on the scale of the ESSER grants, to maintain, let's say, all of our behavioral health staff that are funded through that grant, that we're not hearing any information that sort of funding is on the horizon.
Okay, anyone else? On that cheery note?
Good news all around.
Good news all around. Well, that particular part isn't, but in general, I think. So we're going to close our discussion on the proposed budget then and go on to bus transportation, old business.
Thank you, by the way.
Thank you.
So Mrs. Peterson is on the meeting this evening because, as you know, she has been the point person for transportation, so she is our resident expert. Ms. Peterson, would you like to screen share yourself so you can advance through slides, or would you like me to screen share?
I'm not currently a co-host, so it won't allow me to screen share.
That can be remedied. And just like that, you're a co-host.
Thank you. I apologize, it's not coming up for some reason. Hold on.
No worries.
I'm sorry, Dr. Burnham, for some reason it's not allowing me.
All right, let me see if I can pull that up then.
Yeah, there it is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we'll start with a slide, just, again, this is, similar to a presentation that we had provided to the committee back in September. Again, I think it's good to start with what the current policy is, because that's what ultimately this conversation is going to lead to a decision, again, about whether or not to change policy, and if we're changing policy, what direction are we headed with a change. So for everybody's benefit, we have included the current transportation policy, which essentially says that we transport all of the students at the primary school, K through 2, and for our students that are in grades 3 through 12, we transport those who live 1.5 miles or more from the school. And again, I think just for historical context, this just indicates the frequency with which over the last year and a half or so, the topic of transportation has been on the agenda in one way, shape, or form with this committee. And again, parents, we had started the practice last year of emailing the school committee agendas home to families after they had posted with Town Hall. So we can take a look at some data, and I just want to take a moment to thank Liz Peterson for all of her efforts in gathering really, I think, pretty much every piece of data, or pretty close, that you'll see this evening. So, enrollment data for the current school year. As of now, we have a total of 1,579 students. Pre-K students are 47 total are not eligible for transportation, except of course if they are afforded transportation through their IEP. So currently, this is the breakdown by school. And we did include our 7 students in our ACE program that's housed at TCP. However, those students are all receiving special education transportation, so those students would not be a factor in any of your decision-making relative to policy. Another point of information, to date this year, 132 student parking permits have been issued. So you can assume from that that at least 132 high school students are not on the bus because they're driving their car to school. However, there may actually be more students being transported by student drivers. They might be driving siblings. If they've had their license long enough, they might be driving friends or neighbors. So that right now is the minimum number of students that are arriving by student-driven vehicles. This year, that number fluctuates year to year.
Also goes up over the course of the year.
As more students attain their license, as long as there are still spaces available. So we also wanted to take a look at, our current enrollment in terms of those students who would be ineligible for transportation under the current transportation policy. And we did break those numbers down for you by distance from school, because I know at one point this committee was considering perhaps adjusting the mileage in the policy. So we thought that these numbers would be beneficial for you to have. Additionally, at one point there was an inquiry as to how many students lived on Mass Ave, so you also have that breakdown. When we take a look at the transportation requests, those transportation forms that we asked parents to submit, when we take a look at that data, those students who, under the current policy, would be ineligible, we've provided you the breakdown, and we've combined the schools there because we're looking at bus routes. So there's a secondary bus route. The buses go out, they pick up our students 6 through 12, they bring them, they drop them off at LMHS, they go back out on a route, and they pick up our students at the primary in Turkey Hill, bring them, drop them off to Turkey Hill, proceed to the primary school, drop them off there, and it's the same in the afternoon for return trips home. But again, that gives you a sense of the numbers, who, again, based on the transportation forms we received, these kiddos are on the bus right now. But they would be deemed ineligible by the current policy. We had given you some information on the transportation requests that we had received, and to date, we have received 632 transportation forms, not all bus requests, because we ask parents to indicate on the form if you're a car drop-off in the morning, if you're a car pickup in the afternoon, if your student is registered for extended day, before and after school. There's a lot of other information that we get from those forms. We have received 632 of them since the April 15th deadline that we proposed when we sent the form out last March. Now, There were duplicates and others that submitted forms that were later deemed ineligible because they're actually homeschooling or they're pre-K students and we don't transport pre-K. So the next data point is that the district has accommodated 525 additional students with bus transportation since the April 15th deadline. Oftentimes, I talk about the concern with assigning to its complete capacity the buses right at the beginning of the year, because we do have students new to Lunenburg enrolling throughout a school year. So this is some data for new registrations that we received through the summer, all the way up until today, and that is broken down by school as well.
109, wait a minute. Okay, I'm sorry, I misread. Like, we got 109 new registrations.
And just for some context, because this is only through essentially half the year, just for context, we wanted to let you revisit that data for an entire school year using last year's school year numbers for new students. So during the 21-22 school year, we registered 304 new students in total. So we've talked about, well, what's the seating capacity on the bus? So we looked at, well, how many buses do we have with an 83 passenger capacity? And that number is based on 3 students to a seat. If we're talking about 2 students to a seat, the number is much less. So particularly at the lower grades, 3 to a seat is feasible based on the size of the students. It's not so feasible when you start talking about the older students at the secondary level, 6 through 12. And then if you take a look at the breakdown, we've looked at this by school. So at the primary school, the total of all grades, 324 students riding. And if you look at that compared to the total enrollment of the K-2 students, 94% of our students at the primary school are on the bus.
I'd like to say the pickup and drop-off lines may actually show different.
I was just about to say that. This does not
So not
reflect reality.
Exactly. And this is the dilemma that we face all the time.
Yep.
Because this is based on who submitted the form indicating that they needed a bus assignment.
Yep.
We know that not everybody who requests a bus assignment actually utilizes the bus, which then creates the challenge, well, we may have more seats available in reality. So we are also working with the bus company right now to get a head count, and it's best not to do that on a single day, you know, because you could have a high absentee rate that day. So we try to collect that data at least 2 days, maybe 3 days, to kind of get a sense of what's the more consistent ridership number. But this is based on the forms that we have. This is the bus ridership at Turkey Hill Elementary. 79% of the Turkey Hill kiddos are on the bus. Middle school, 80% of the kiddos are on the bus. And then by the time we get to the high school, 62%. And that makes total sense because that's where you see kiddos now having a license, getting a parking pass, driving themselves to school, driving their siblings, or if they meet requirements with the time they've had their license, they might be transporting neighbors and friends as well. We have had conversations with the bus company about their approach to determining, how many kiddos they can accommodate on a bus. And essentially, this is the formula that the manager of the bus company uses when figuring out how many kiddos can I assign to the bus. Again, the challenge, the parking pass number is fluid year to year. That's different times of the year. It can change. Student enrollment throughout the year, those total numbers of students changes. But this is how they approach it. Okay. Liz, did you have anything that you wanted to add in reference to any particular slide or just in general?
I think you pretty much covered most of it. The only thing that I wanted to point out, because it is confusing to people, is the bus capacities. Because normally the bus capacities, definitely for the lower levels, like we said, you can fit 3 to a seat. Depending on the bus, and we've talked in the past about the Whalum area in particular being a heavy area for students riding the bus. So in that area, a lot of times the bus drivers will opt for 2 to a seat and not 3. Definitely for the LMHS runs, almost always, except for possibly 6th graders, that is pretty much always 2 to a seat. So to just keep that in mind when you're looking at capacity, even though we do have the 83 passenger and the 77 passenger, most of the time it's 2 per seat. So it's either the 54 students or the 50 students per bus.
So is there a contractual element to these formulas? Like, are we obligated to abide by these bus company formulas, or what
No.
bearing do these formulas have?
I'll invite Mr. Cassidy to come talk about the contractual obligation. But these formulas are not written into the contract.
Can you repeat the question?
So-
Can you clarify the question?
Yeah,
I
so
heard
that
it.
we have these formulas, which is basically very inelastic, right? It's the enrollment minus parking spaces, or enrollment minus, basically enrollment, which do not account for any elasticity, right? We're not running our buses at 100% capacity even now. And I'm not saying we should, but I'm saying we don't. So ultimately, we need to figure out what is that elasticity buffer and how do we best fill it through policy, in my view, right? That's the most efficient use of our dollars and the best path that we can help families out who are running into this problem around safety and transportation. So my question really is, are we under any restrictions with the bus company in terms of how we do that? Ms. Peterson has just provided their formulas, but it seems as if their formulas are just
A formula we could have come up with.
I look at the formula as it's the number of students per bus that's how many kids, when they look at the list, okay, now we'll make our map, this is how many kids are gonna be on that bus, and they stop.
Right,
It's
And,
not,
and through the conversations with the bus company, as I understand it, Air Shirley buses everyone, but the bus company can load up the bus because they know that not all students are going to ride the bus.
right.
And essentially, that would be their approach with us as well. They would just assign and load up the bus, but then in reality, there might be some bus routes that are busting at the seam, and then others that have lots of open seating. And then, the question becomes, well, do they then, once the sort of steady ridership is established, make adjustments to the bus routes? And the answer is yes. They would say, oh, you have space on your bus, you're near this route that's heavy, you need to swing over to this bus stop or these 2 bus stops and pick up these kids. They won't be assigned to that bus anymore, they're now on your bus. And that's just the adjustments that they make throughout the year as conditions warrant.
I think, just thinking about this past year, it was fine, but let's say we do it this year, this formula is gonna expand, the number of students per bus are gonna be much higher. Maybe it's 70, maybe it's 80, whatever it is. But I get your point, it's like, yeah, the numbers are gonna be lower because people don't show up, but that day one, they don't know which bus is gonna fill up quick, and how do they deal with the full bus where they
Right.
can't pick up the next 6 kids?
Well, I think, the way I think of this is, from a policy perspective, a 1.5-mile radius is impractical, as we've learned over the course of the last year. So we need to be thinking of this in terms of, well, what is a practical policy? And in my mind, it starts with capacity, right? Like, we can budget for, what do we have, 11 buses on the road or something like that. And so it's whatever the seating capacity is for those 11 buses times 2 routes minus some kind of buffer, right? Because we have to figure out utilization of those, likely utilization of those with some fudge factor for new enrollments or whatever, right? So what I'm getting to here is through the miracle of extremely precise management on Ms. Peterson's part, we were able to accommodate almost everybody, I think, this year, which was amazing. And I think that given your proposal around personnel this year, if we can bring in a enrollment officer to kind of help us manage that in the future, then what we'll be getting is much more efficient use of our busing dollars than we ever got previously, because we just managed this as a radius and used effectively these formulas and ran a lot of buses around with empty seats. The question is what is the capacity that we can realistically plan to? And then what is the policy for managing those that we can't accommodate? Right? What does that really mean? Do you start drawing lines at distance? Do you start drawing lines at age? Do you start drawing lines at the road that they live on and sidewalk? Like, those are all the things that I think are the factors that probably need to get figured into how we prioritize in the summer months that we're figuring out what kids are going to ride what buses. And there's no doubt that it's a lot of work, but I think that we've got to come up with something that's fair based on capacity and then, what is effectively need.
So I'd like to make a few comments. One, I think we also have to decide whether there's going to be a need for restrictions. So I think looking at the data, we are able to get everybody on the bus. But the concern is it's not going away of the first week, 2 weeks of the how do we know which kids aren't taking the bus and how do we know which ones are? And I think that's a huge issue. But then if we get to okay, if there is going to be restrictions, I think it should be about safety. It's not about distance. Let's look at each street individual. Maybe there's a committee or a group that looks at these streets, walks through them, and then we get a safety number for each street. Maybe if it's even each address or a range of addresses on each street, so you have a safety rating of these streets. But honestly, I would love to see it. If we can do it, why wouldn't we then just get everybody on the bus if the numbers work out? But I think it's the issue of let's make sure we can figure out how to do this so we're not having that panic first 2 weeks of, no, you can't ride a bus yet because we haven't figured it out yet.
I think there's a critical piece of missing data here, which you've addressed, which is how many kids are actually riding the bus today.
That's it.
Because the formula then becomes at different grade levels, right? These are the forms we got, this is actual ridership. And then we can begin to plan, overcapacity planning, right? Like we can probably assign 130% of the seats on a bus knowing that we're actually gonna fill 80% of them, right? Like that's the kind of math that we need to start doing.
It would just be unfair to also, we're going to punish these people who live so close, who actually are taking the bus, but then we have this insane number at the primary school who are claiming they're taking the bus when they're not. So I'd rather, take their bus rights away if they're getting driven every day and picked up every day than the kids who actually really need it just because they live closer and it's not an option. It's not fair.
I did a little preliminary math, and it looks to me like there's no problem with the primary or the elementary school. The problem is at the high school.
Okay.
With my preliminary math that may be shaky, but I used my calculator.
Gotta be right then.
But I think it's not high over capacity though. So I think your point is, because I came up with, if I took the 132 kids with the parking passes out, and knowing that maybe next year it's 120 parking passes, but there's probably 132 kids in those cars. So I used that, and I came up with 57.2 kids in a bus. Now, so with 2 kids to a bus, 4 of the buses, you're pretty darn close to the 54, and 8 of the buses, you have a problem. But with the little kids, there's no problem at all. So I don't think we have to worry about the little kids, younger students on the bus, saying, well, maybe we should make sure the primary kids or whatever. That's not the issue.
Yeah,
the issue is the middle and high school. So I think that the ticket to me is getting an accurate count of the middle and high school, which is tricky because somebody may say, well, yes, I take the bus, but not during football season and not during softball season. And that's where I think you end up with the bigger problem. So I don't know what your contingency would be if you decided, which obviously we're not deciding anything tonight, but if you decided to set policy to bus everybody, then you're going to have to run an additional bus or something maybe for the second run, the early run.
See, I
don't know.
I don't view it that way. I think that the way we would need to do it is come up with a reliable formula for capacity, and then come up with, this is the capacity we're going to plan to based on the forms that we receive. And then once we exceed that capacity, then we need to figure out who can't ride, who we can't accommodate, or who we can't guarantee a seat on the bus, or whatever. And we've got to figure out what those factors are. I don't think we should be planning to roll an additional bus as a fudge factor for the months of September and October. Like, that's not practical. It is practical to say, we want to accommodate everybody, but if we can't, because the requests have exceeded our projected capacity, then these are the factors that we will use, and a timeline to stick to say, we're sorry, but we can't accommodate you right now because we don't have capacity. There's a time element to this as well, not just a capacity element. And I know this is going to be hard. Like, there's no doubt this requires some higher level thinking here, but in my mind, we're spending a lot of money on buses.
Yeah.
People were crying last year that we weren't availing the buses to the people who needed them. I think it's just, we need to figure out how to make these things work as efficiently as possible. and accommodate as many people as possible.
Mr.
I
Layton?
think a question for Ms. Peterson and maybe the superintendent as well. Would it make sense for a policy, would the numbers work out that we could have a policy that would be the primary in Turkey Hill, all kids were bused? Would that be feasible?
Could I
Yes,
jump
please.
in,
Yep.
Dr. Burnham? Okay. I think it would be feasible at this point, from what I've seen with the number of transportation requests that we received, and calculation of the formula with the number of students on the bus. Currently, the way that I figured out capacity, because I took that formula and I did our current numbers based on our transportation forms. So currently, I come out with for primary and THES run, 59.9 students per bus, which definitely would be doable. For the LMHS run, it was 62.5 for students per bus, which still would be doable. Like you're saying, it would be heavier in some areas, and then we would have to look at possibly route changes or the number of students on one bus and having a split from that bus and taking some of the students off of that bus and putting them on a different bus, which we have done these past 2 years. Because we did realize that like I said, in the Whalum area, there was an influx of a lot of students. So we did take some of those students off certain buses and rerouted them onto other buses as we needed to. And I have to say the parents were very accommodating with that and appreciated that we were trying to find them a solution. So that I don't think would be a big problem. But as far as policy goes, I would pretty much say we could bus students from K through 5 at least, and we would not have an issue.
So a follow-up, thank you. If a bus was near capacity because of that first couple weeks, would that grade level and those school levels, would they be able to triple up if they had to, just to get everybody in?
Absolutely. I've talked to the office manager about that at D-Bus and also one of the owners. And they work with us all the time to accommodate whether we have to reroute a bus or whether we have to accommodate by putting more students on one bus or another. So I don't think that would be a problem in the first few weeks to be able to do that. We've pretty much done it before in certain buses.
Thank you. I think that for me just solidifies Turkey Hill and primary. I think more of the discussion needs to be taken into account for middle school and high school though.
Tony has a comment.
Mr. Schoenbrini?
I don't know if this is like an inappropriate suggestion, but if we said the bus policy is that everybody at Turkey Hill and primary school gets busing as requested, and then we did a first come, first serve for the rest, that would allow the parents who feel they have the most need to prioritize that in a way that might eliminate some of the complaints that we had last time. Like, if you have a kid that lives on an unsafe street, like we can guess, like I think we all know which streets are unsafe near the Turkey Hill and the middle high school, but we might not know in a way that the parents would know about other unsafe streets, and if they know those streets are unsafe, it would motivate them to get their request in on time.
I'd throw in there that the chaos comes from the late entries.
Right.
If we could impress upon parents that there's a hard deadline past which we can't accommodate because we need to leave seats open for any new to Lunenburg registrations. We need to have space open because sometimes folks move within town and that takes them to a different bus route. So we are going to have to leave some seats, to your point. There's got to be a formula that a certain percentage are kind of held open for those folks. The challenge is in the huge volume of transportation forms that come in after the deadline. And, I mean, the feedback that we've heard consistently is, well, it didn't matter last year, right? Isn't this going to be like in the past where, we'll just discuss it and everybody will end up on the bus in the end? I think that for the purposes of the bus company, planning the routes and assigning kids and maximizing the capacity of each bus and designing routes around where the greatest number of kids are located, I need 2 buses to head that way to that location because I've got that many kids. We really are going to need parents to understand that there's a deadline, but there's a deadline for a purpose. It's for planning so that parents can get that information back prior to school and know that their kiddo has been assigned to bus 3 or bus 8. And that's settled and they know it and they're just waiting for the timing and the routes to be posted, just before school opens so that they know where their bus stop is located. That's the challenge, is that we are going to have to shift the culture and expectation a bit based on recent years' past practice, that they have a certain expectation of how things will ultimately unfold. And honestly, I think to avoid the constant communication back and forth with the bus company in the last handful of weeks before school opens, we need to shift, I'll have to move this kiddo off of this bus and put them on, it's a lot of work in the final hours. I think we need to pick a date that's a reasonable date for parents to submit the form. The challenge relative to, that I want you just to consider, relative to, we bus all students up through grade 5. And then it's, as Mr. Schoolambrini suggested, it's a first come, first serve, for the secondary level. The challenge is, by law, we have to bus any student, even in the 6th grade, 2 miles or more. So a late comer, who by law we're obligated to transport, now wreaks havoc with the policy. If it's a first come, first serve, we accommodate request up to the capacity
Which
for
even
secondary.
Even in the K through 5 scenario, the route planning, a deadline that serves route planning when we're legally obligated to transport them anyway, like we're not going to solve that. It's going to be really hard to solve that.
But we would know who those students are, right? Like we have the enrollment, we've done the work last spring, literally, and I think some parents, Ms. Peterson can tell you, were rather surprised when we could tell them the exact mileage from the door of the school to the door of their house. We did that work for everybody.
I'm all for coming up with some kind of enforceable deadline if we can, and a really good communication plan to go along with that, and a really good exceptions after the deadline, prioritization, whatever we need to do, because I guarantee you the first year we will not exceed total capacity with a deadline. Like, that won't happen. But there's a lot of work to do to figure out that prioritization criteria and that sort of thing. But I think we're leaning into the right track here,
Right.
particularly for grades 7 through 12. Like, I think that makes really good sense.
I'm perfectly okay with the first come, first served 7 through 12.
See, I worry about more of the safety issue, like the kid who has to cross Mass Ave, or the kid who doesn't have a sidewalk, that there's different variations of roads around the schools.
Then the parent doesn't
Parents
first
do,
come,
yeah.
first served. The parent gets that in right away. You got to put the
I
responsibility
know a lot of the parents last year were saying,
somewhere.
oh, we didn't get the email, oh, we didn't see the multiple things. I don't know adding a paper component to sending something home.
We've already started talking strategy on that.
Yeah,
Because
pigeons, anything that's going to get the word that this is the date. So that we
And
can't be
I will
wrong.
say that honestly, I think no matter how many
Still gonna-
modes of communication, there are people who don't, they're not attentive to any communications relative to school and will legitimately say they never saw it because they didn't open it, or they didn't listen to the voicemail, or they didn't, right?
Yeah.
But if we communicate this repeatedly in many, many, many venues and modes,
Been having
This
the
is one that we
homeroom
want
teachers.
complaints that we're over
Right,
communicating.
But even homeroom
We
teachers.
welcome the complaints.
So, another, to your point again, where you said that you really can't fill up the buses, because what if kids come in? So where is the line? Where do you stop? Like, how do we incorporate that into policy? How do we have a line so that there are
how many
spaces?
extra spaces are
Yeah, do you
sufficient?
keep when you're saying, okay, first come, first serve, but you're next in line, but I don't know if we're gonna put you in there. When do you say no?
Well, I think
That's a good question.
I think some of that will be when we start looking at enrollment, where people live, and ridership on the buses. We take those numbers and then we figure out what the buffer needs to be for new enrollments. 3 seats a route, something like, whatever it is. And I'm sure there's a way mathematically
Use
to
the data. Yeah.
to use the data to come up with, some kind of reliable prediction.
right, we can look at the new registrations over the course of last year, this year. Where do those kiddos tend to live? How many, how many were added to each bus, that kind of a thing.
I mean, you're even we could even probably predict like where our most transient students are, right? Like I have a pretty good idea where they are.
Well, I think
know,
as
like
Liz said too, they could switch the routes if they have to
Yep.
throughout the year, so that's not an issue. I think it's more of just let's set a number, and whether it's in policy,
Right.
Probably.
And then those seats are
where that capacity.
filled only
I would
with
think.
new to Lunenburg students. They're not filled with late-coming requests from
Right.
prior enrolled students.
I think
Dr.
we have to-
Burnham, could I just make another comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment in regards to the deadline. Really, the biggest reason we want to have a deadline is because then once the deadline comes, the online transportation forms generate a spreadsheet for me that I then look at and break down exactly what I need to be able to communicate to the bus company, so that then they in turn can look and see how they want to configure the routes for that year, based on the number of students in each area or on certain streets. There's a lot of things that go into thinking about how the routes are going to be and how many students on the buses and everything like that. But it starts with the deadline of the forms, so that I can then take that data and break that data down for the bus company, so that they can look at all of that. So that's the biggest reason why, for me, I feel we need a deadline.
And for the bus
So that-
company.
And the bus company, so that we have time to be able to use that data, give it to the bus company, and then they in turn have time to be able to figure out the routes and get the routes to us in a timely manner, so that we can communicate it out to parents.
So are we at the point here where it's time for this to go to policy, or should we have some form of community input before we go to policy? I guess is my question.
I'd like to see it go to policy,
I
because I
would
think
go
we're
to-
gonna have community input
Yeah.
as we read the first reading,
Well,
second reading,
we
third
could
reading
do
as
that.
well, not only at their meetings as well.
We could have it go to policy, and then usually we waive the first reading. We would not waive the first reading, and we would have a communication blast on this is the topic of this conversation for the evening.
I think that's the right path.
Definitely.
Okay, so, because we want to make sure people have a chance to comment in, but I think we collectively, I'm hearing, have a pretty good sense of what we want to do, or at least want to take a look at.
I have a procedural question.
Yes,
These first reading, second reading, final reading, are we precluded from amending at any point along that way?
No.
Like, is there, you don't
You
have to go.
can, but then it
do
goes
not pass-
back to a first reading again.
Okay, and I guess that's really kind of the point that I'm trying to get to here, is we might have a couple of first readings if we go that route. So we need to
so be it.
really
Work
publicize
out the
this.
details.
Well, the committee work is very important, obviously, here, but also we need to really publicize the discussion around that first reading, because we're very likely to need to make an amendment or two.
Based off of public input?
Yeah. Or just the opinion of the broader committee.
So I guess I would suggest that at this point that we send this to committee, and as soon as the policy committee can meet and work out basically what we've been talking about, I would suggest the policy committee get a date that, from Mrs. Peterson, that they think is going to work, and bring that back as soon as humanly possible, so we have a chance to work through all of that before we get to the deadline that Mrs. Peterson is going to recommend.
Yeah.
So that would, and maybe this
It
first
effectively
year.
takes a month and a half to do this, just the readings process, so
Right,
like, time
right,
is
it
super
does.
We
important.
could get creative and have special meetings just
Yeah.
for reading
Just
the
for the
policy.
purpose of this policy,
That
we
wouldn't be a
can
bad idea to
always
speed
do
up the
that.
process too.
Yep.
Yeah, we can always do that, that's not an issue. So,
So just to be clear, just to recap,
yes,
you're looking for policy to reflect transportation of all students up through sixth grade? Then 7 through 12, we're looking to ensure that there's well, for all, that there's going to be a hard deadline.
yes.
Yes.
A hard deadline, and then
And also a limit or a capacity.
a capacity that
Language.
somehow language, I'm hearing first come, first served, but if the committee comes up, if the policy committee comes up with something else, I like that wording, because then people who have drastic problems will jump on it. Exactly.
Yeah, and when the district's limit, it doesn't even have to be a set number in policy potentially, but maybe the school district's limit
The school district's limit
is reached.
is reached, and then that limit will be a mathematical formula.
Yeah, but I don't know if that formula necessarily needs to be in policy. I'm trying to figure out
Yeah.
how that's gonna end up in policy, but yeah, I don't think it has to be a formula in policy, but maybe
Or like a
language that
specific
says there is a limit.
So,
Yeah, I think we need to tease this out a little bit. Like, this whole first come, first served thing, I can just think of all kinds of extenuating circumstances where somebody is next in line, but somebody deeper down the list has a high, you know what I mean? Like, there's,
but there has to be a limit. There has to be a point.
I completely agree.
And I mean, obviously, if somebody breaks their leg and
Special
needs the
education.
transportation, that's
Medical.
one thing.
That's temporary, yeah.
That's temporary, that's an issue. But, if after all this outreach, and it will, be all, we'll have to make sure that it's all over everywhere, and we'll rent one of those flashing light signs to say, new policy, make sure you read your email or whatever, then there has to be a limit. People have to be responsible at some point. And if I had a kid that had to walk up Mass Ave, you can be sure it would be in that first day.
And I think most of the complaints we've gotten from parents about the safety issues will be those parents who are on the first day. So,
I would
Is it,
think.
is it right now an electronic form that everyone submits?
It's an electronic form. And that way, when people complete, it's date and time
That's
stamped.
why I was thinking paper-wise, it's gonna be. that'll be-
And did they get a receipt that it was received?
We can work,
Yes.
they did, and we would make sure
Because
that,
that would be important.
Yes,
Because if they forget to hit send or something, that happens to
Mm-hmm.
people.
yeah. And we can also see in our transportation spreadsheet, the actual form that was submitted. So I can see when it's date and time stamped, I can also see attached their form if I want to click on it and look at the actual form.
So just one more thought. I know I'm beating a dead horse on this first come, first serve after the deadline kind of thing. This goes back to an argument that you and I have had for years over who we represent.
Yes, we have had this argument for years.
So let me take your side for a moment.
Understandable.
Kid has a totally negligent parent and winds up walking uphill both ways in 4 feet of snow
With the Barry sacks on his back, yeah.
in, on a road that doesn't have a sidewalk and the big plows going up and down, right? I mean,
That's a
that is the
reasonable
kid
comment.
that I am concerned about.
yep.
And-
So let me
and
alleviate that
when
concern.
you throw this back on the parent, I feel like our job is to watch out for that kid.
Reasonable comment.
Yep. So our school administrators and, particularly the secretaries in each of the buildings know those families that do not respond to any communications, so they recognize that they hadn't received last summer the forms from some of the families that they know are reluctant to be returning things on time, if at all. And they did outreach specifically to the family to verify whether or not they were going to need transportation, and then on the phone, in conversation, worked with them to complete, the secretary worked to complete the information on the form. So we know who those families are that are likely not, will have the need, but are likely not going to be attentive and on time. And we can do direct outreach to those
And I'm
families.
glad to hear that, and
That's a
that
good
is the
point.
right
And we
answer.
did it already,
From a
yeah.
policy standpoint,
Yeah.
maybe we even write in that outreach piece of it, right? Because we need to write policy that assumes that you're not going to be in the job next year, and Liz
Right.
won't be in her job. This needs to be policy that even
Stands.
assumes you don't know who
Yes.
those people are,
Right.
right? So,
Very good point. And they also work on the idea of people that can't function the technology.
Correct.
When we're talking 7 to 12, those kids can function the technology.
Right.
They should be able to help their parents too.
But, in the event of a few that may not have internet access and can't, complete that, we already know who those families are as well, because we accommodate that with sending home paper information or paper forms to complete. But again, we can also have phone conversations with those folks and make sure that the form is being completed. And the important piece about doing it via phone and completing it with the person on the phone, you're still getting the date and time stamp. Whereas if you send the form home, then there's the time delay to return it, and it's just more timely and efficient to have that outreach.
Is this something that we could even have the 7th through 12th grade students receive those messages as well, so that they're in the loop,
Pushing their parent.
They're old enough.
Yeah.
that they're getting the memo as well?
I can answer that, yes. We sent the transportation form, the online one, out through a link, so we could absolutely include students in that, so those students could get that as well. The only problem with that is that we found that sometimes even parents didn't remember that they submitted it and submitted it again, so we ended up getting duplicates, and then I had to weed through to see what were duplicates. So I probably would have to do that if a parent received it and a student and they both filled it out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
Fair
could see a husband and a wife doing the same thing though, too.
Right. So, but that's inconsequential with the whole thing. I mean, I go through anyway and look for duplicates, and we mark them as duplicates, so all the secretaries and we share that spreadsheet, so all of us know all the information.
And that's another good, point to justify the need for a deadline, because there is legwork that we have to do to clean up that list
Right.
in order to turn it over to the bus company.
Okay,
Ms. Peterson, do you have any other questions for clarification relative to the policy direction?
I don't at this time. I probably will once we get into the weeds of it, but not right now.
Okay.
I just want to thank the committee for taking the time and the consideration for really delving into not only the policy, but transportation in general. Thank you.
we thank you for all the work you do. First off, the astronomical amount of work it takes to deal with the transportation itself, but also for the work in putting together the presentation so we can understand what's going on. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, then we are going to move on to Keystone update.
The only update I have for you this evening is the annual report that's been dropped into your folders.
Okay, thank you. And so now we're on committee reports. Does anyone have a committee report? Yes, Laura.
I have the primary school. We met on December 19th, discussed the 23-24 draft for the primary and Turkey Hill School calendar. Stephanie Miller gave another great presentation about the SEL program and provided examples of the work that the students have been doing, which is so great to see. Pre-K, we're doing gingerbread men when I last talked to them and doing writing assessments with name writing and letter writing. Kindergarten, we're finishing their second module in ELA for synonyms and letters of the alphabet. They also were doing gingerbread and holidays around the world. First grade, I'm actually part of the first grade team because my son's in the first grade. They sent us this survey, which was awesome. Brian, you got this too, I'm sure, to ask what family members they celebrated at home or what your family celebrated at home, and they incorporated that into all of their lessons, which I thought was really nice. And they also did reindeer games, which was super fun too. And second grade, we're doing fairy tale modules, differences between the different fairy tales. Once again, gingerbread week, where each teacher was reading a different story and making gingerbread houses that go along with the books. So they're having a grand old time down there.
All right, that sounds great.
Yes.
Anybody else with an update? Yes.
Capital planning has met, I think, 3 times since we last met. Once again, thank you.
Saw him, like,
That
late
assignment?
December meeting.
Holy
I was like,
smokes.
wow.
Actually, it was 4 times with that late meeting. So we actually finalized our plan twice, and there was a snafu was associated with the first finalization. We rated 29 requests. We did not rate one request, which was related to the drainage on Flat Hill Road, because it just was not a fully enough developed plan. And so hopefully that will come back next year, because it's clearly a need, just did not have a complete enough plan associated with it. So of those 29 items, the school department related items, the THES exterior door upgrades and replacements was rated number 2. The number 1 was the ambulance. The THES security upgrades was rated number 3. The primary security upgrades was rated number 4. The Turkey Hill upgrade for the fire alarm system was rated number 7. The school pickup truck and plow and sander was rated number 15. And the Lunenburg Middle High School 3M window safety film was rated number 18, and the middle school, high school turf field feasibility study was rated number 20. And that was the lowest of the school department request ratings of the 29 items. So the process, as I know you're well aware, is that this has now been submitted to the town manager. It will get rolled into her budget process, be briefed to both the finance committee and the select board for comment, and she will bring both her prioritization and a recommended funding level for the capital plan to town meeting. And we should receive, I would imagine, some indication in terms of what is above and below the line sometime in the February, March timeframe. I think we fared fairly well on this, on the whole, but it was really the merits of the requests that ultimately got us there. I personally am concerned with both the middle school, high school feasibility study and its ranking. It's a little lower than I'd like it to be, and in fact, I've publicly stated at our meeting that I will personally advocate to the town manager that it be moved up. It's interestingly lower than a field project for McNally Park, and in my view, the need is more pressing for the middle high school turf field, given the deterioration that's occurring there. And obviously, the safety film was quite a bit lower than I had recommended and hoped for. But we may see it all funded, depending upon how things shake out. There are potential alternative sources of funding for the ambulance that include the special purpose stabilization account and ARPA. So that's $500,000 that if we take off the top, there's potentially more funding for capital funding. So all in all, I think we did pretty well here, and we'll see how things shake out over the course of the next few months.
Thank you, and I think that's pretty encouraging. Yes.
Yeah, so I just had a couple. So Turkey Hill is going to be meeting, advisory is going to be meeting in February 2nd. The building design committee met on December 19th. We reviewed the select board feedback and the school committee feedback. Planning board is going to be a little later. Most of it focused on the hybrid discussion. The select board liked the hybrid discussion. The school committee kind of focused on the hybrid discussion as well. The APDC representative said that the hybrid version of the Ritter building having an annex was very feasible. It was likely that you could attach or put next to the Ritter, and it wouldn't be an issue with historical aspects. So that was a good sign. That also had the Brooks House just kind of open-ended, and there was definitely discussion by the committee that they liked the idea of using the community links and the early learning center in the Brooks House. So that was some good feedback. Gym space was definitely an issue. We had talked about that. There was one idea that Mr. Jeffries had brought up about using the City United potentially, or United Parish space, because really the gyms are at capacity, but there wasn't a lot of interest in the idea of building a gym in the back. And maybe that'll be more discussions, because again, the gyms are full, whether it's TCP, Turkey Hill Primary. I was just at Turkey Hill tonight, and there's basketball after 5 o'clock. It's like it starts right away, so that was a concern.
Can I just jump in on that? Because when Mr. Jeffries contacted me, he asked me to call City United to ask them if the school department could rent from them, and I said, it is not for school department programs. We're worried about community programs that will not have a space. So I haven't heard back from him.
Yeah, so part of that hybrid version, again, is the school, after-school programs needing a space. So they would be going back to the primary school in Turkey Hill, taking up the gym space and the cafeteria space, potentially pushing out basketball youth programs, adult programs that are going to use those spaces. So gym space is definitely an issue that's going to be a problem that we've even discussed too. And our next meeting is on the 12th.
Was there a request for information that was made to the school district from the building committee? pertaining to our commentary.
So it was about, yeah, Carolyn, if you want to respond to that.
Mr. Jeffries wrote me a letter and asked about the gym space. Could we use the City United spot? And that they were looking favorably at using the Brooks House. And he asked for numbers, enrollment numbers, and hours of the school, and enrollment numbers of the early childhood programs.
Okay.
That was the request.
My reason for asking is, and it may have come in a conversation that I had with Mr. Jeffries, or it may come from watching a meeting. It's all kind of running into each other with the holidays. My understanding was that there was a question around utilization of those gyms.
He did ask me
And-
what groups used the gyms.
And also, in the event that we were to construct something new, is a full-size gym necessary? Is a TC Passio-sized gym necessary? You know, to which my response was, I don't know. But I was under the impression that the question had been asked, so.
He did ask that question, and I said it wasn't our programs that would be using that gym, so I didn't know.
Yeah, it really should be reaching out to the
Reach out to
youth
the
basketball
youth
programs,
programs.
the adults, even the pickleball. They were in TCP the other night. It's like, it's everybody. It's the adult programs, the youth programs. Everybody's using the gyms.
When TCP is going to be used as staging areas or whatever, however they're going to use that during construction, that gym isn't going to be able to be used.
Yeah,
So these people need a place to go.
I think that this is
That's not us.
it isn't us, but because these programs are currently run in our facilities, when we can't accommodate for them, we're going to hear about it.
Well,
And,
yeah.
and I do think that it is incumbent upon us to communicate the issue not only with the building committee, but also some of these organizations. And let me just give you of what's informing this. As a member of the Capital Planning Committee, I've gotten some emails in the last couple of weeks about McNally Park and about Marshall Park. And the reason being is that the Little League Association is hot on that topic.
Well, yeah.
Because they're concerned about losing field space and a whole bunch of issues. And so they're on it. They're communicating with the powers that be to make their opinions known. I don't know that anybody in the Lunenburg Youth Basketball Association knows of what's being discussed right now. I don't know that, you know what I mean? Like, I know obviously that you're involved in the volleyball program, so I assume that's covered, but I want to make sure that our tenants are aware that there's some concern about our ability to serve them long-term.
Well, I think the building design committee is also going to be concerned about that, because if now the youth basketball program doesn't like what the municipal design committee is doing, the design committee could easily get their ideas shut down, because a bunch of people show up to the town meeting.
They
Frankly,
don't
that's
know
kind
it.
of what I'm getting to here, right? Is that people need to be informed so that their voices can be heard in a timely manner, not at the 11th hour. Because ultimately, I want this to succeed, right? But we got to make sure that we're incorporating and giving as many people as possible who have a vested interest in this the opportunity to articulate their interests.
I can reach out.
Thank you.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Okay, any other reports?
Tony?
Do you have anything, Tony?
Yes, right before Christmas, the PTO met, and they have two fundraisers planned. One is a significant other, no, what is it?
Yeah.
There's a term for it, but it used to be like
Special other.
father-daughter, mother-son dance. They're gonna combine them both.
Special?
Someone special.
Yeah, not significant.
There you go, someone's special dance.
Yeah.
They have plans for a photo booth there in the
cute.
hopes that the photo booth would raise money. They're gonna sell tickets. They also have an event planned in April I think that someone's special event is in February. In April, on the weekend that the Super Mario movie opens, they are hoping to have a fundraiser at Cinema World at 11, so before the movie theater opens, and they got a lot of positive feedback about those two things. So that's what they have planned for the springtime. I don't know anything beyond that. The other thing that they had discussed, and I don't know if this has been resolved yet, is the cover for the school box, or for the sandbox for the pre-K kids, which we have discussed at every PTO meeting I have been at. I don't know how much this cover is, but I'm about ready to just buy it and put it on there.
So I'll follow up with you separately. I can follow up with the folks at the PTO. I was under the impression that that had already been purchased and we were looking to install it. But we'll follow up on that.
It's a good thing we can cover these big issues at school committee.
Yeah, town governance is working. We got the sandbox cover for the pre-K kiddos.
Well, glad we took care of that. My
Only
goodness.
busing were so simple.
So I haven't heard anything from FinCom.
They haven't met.
Very quiet on FinCom. No, I've been looking everywhere. I haven't found an agenda. I haven't found a meeting, so I will keep looking, but I assume we're going to meet sometime soon. Is there, I didn't do public comment. Oh, now it's time. Public comment. Does anyone have a public comment? I am not seeing any public comment. Okay. Then topics for future discussion. So, the next meeting, we want to have a general budget discussion once again. I had down that we need to look at our school committee goals.
That's on my list too.
There we go. We can do that at the next meeting. I won't be here, but that shouldn't be horribly controversial. What else do we have to relook at? The busing, but that's going to
goes
be
to us
after
first,
that
yeah.
goes to committee. Is there anything else that's dragging?
Yeah, I got a
Wait.
couple. Turkey Hill Elementary Facilities Plan. That's been hanging out there, and we
do need to
I think we
talk
really need
about
to
exactly
communicate
what we're going to communicate.
what that is. So, in kind of like the broader municipal building issue, that's something that we need to be able to communicate in a more timely manner.
Yeah, I would agree.
Legislators, we had discussed reaching out to the legislators and meeting
Still
with them.
not there yet.
It's true. Waiting to
You
get
know,
them sworn in.
that was part of my my chair's report, but then I omitted it in the trying to be faster.
Okay.
But until she's sworn in, I don't know if she was sworn in today or not. I don't think so.
It's been
I don't
delayed.
think they
It's been
could.
delayed, yeah.
So,
Wait for the speaker to make his decision.
Okay.
yeah, I think, I mean,
Might be able to put it on next time, but it's still too early. It might be too
So-
short notice.
Carol, is that something you're just going to pay attention to, and when she gets sworn in, you'll reach out to
yes,
the
I'm
group?
all over that one.
Okay, good.
Yep.
And then I had some communication with the superintendent and with the chair a few weeks ago about our responses to emergencies. And I think that is something that should be perhaps referred to policy, as we had discussed, and I just want to check in if that's your intent to do that, or do we need to discuss that as a committee before we send it to subcommittee, or?
Technically? I think, I don't really know what the overall aim is. Your aim is to come up with a procedure kind of thing. And what equates to what level of emergency? Is that where I'm going with this? And how the parents are notified as to what the emergency is?
I think that we need to have a policy that outlines what happens in the event of an emergency, who reaches out to first responders and what their communication guidance should be in terms of who's communicating what, and how the community and parents of those involved are communicated with.
So there's a lot there.
I know.
We have discussions through the district safety team, because members of the police and fire department are on that team. Our last meeting, in attendance was someone from dispatch to talk about 911 and training for staff. So we're on it. I will offer my opinion on this. I don't know that you can capture this in policy.
That's what I was wondering.
We do have written medical emergency type response plans. We also have emergency operations plans for different kinds of scenarios. We don't make those documents public for good reason. Relative to communication, again, you may have some general guidelines around who communicates what and when is something communicated out to parents. Case by case, it's different. The situation, the circumstances, I think that we need to be careful, because if we were to notify families every time any ambulance was called to the school, that may raise questions that families want answered, and based on HIPAA and student confidentiality laws, there's no more information I'm going to be able to provide. So we might actually be creating a situation where there's more angst than is really beneficial, I think.
So I understand all the concerns.
Yep.
And I understand the reluctance to address this from a policy perspective, and I'm not even sure that that's the right path.
I don't think it is.
However,
but-
I raised an issue with the chair and the superintendent several weeks ago, both via email and through a direct discussion.
Yeah.
And the outcome of that was that it was going to be referred to committee. So that was really the,
Referred to the safety team.
okay, my understanding was that it was going to go eventually to a subcommittee. But if that was not your expectation, then we can clarify that right now. And
I
that's
thought
fine.
it was the safety team is where that was going.
Okay.
Right.
Then I personally would like an answer. Then it doesn't need to get referred. I'd like an explanation in terms of where we're at. And it doesn't have to be in this meeting. It
Right,
can
right.
be, because
Okay.
it's an open item for me.
Yep, all right.
So again, I can give you a general update, that this conversation has occurred at our last district safety meeting. We meet monthly, and more conversation and follow-up is going to be had at our next meeting as well. And there are, some things that we're following up on. Again, like I mentioned, training for staff, ensuring that our phone systems are functioning the way the dispatch needs them to, making adjustments or modifications if that's necessary so that it meets the requirements that are necessary. So all of that is definitely underway. Relative to, a decision as to guidelines around what is communicated and when. There are situations where we're having discussions with, let's say, the police department over, is this something that we're communicating out to parents now? And what can we say? What should we say? What should we not be disclosing? So those types of decisions, again, are context dependent, and, generally speaking, are not made in isolation by one person. I'd have to give some consideration to it, but it would be difficult, I think, to capture parameters around and guidance around what exactly gets communicated, but we could certainly explore that.
For the benefit of the other members of the committee who might not be fully informed of the background here.
We met.
Okay. And the public, for that matter. There have been a number of ambulance calls to the middle high school over the course of the last several months, an unusually high amount. I happen to be on the property in the midst of dropping my son off when a call occurred in December. And I found the response to be alarming. Very alarming, personally. And I know it was a 1 in a million shot where I happened to be there when it happened. But I think that I would just like some answers in terms of what drives a call for emergency services, how that request is framed, and what the response, what the typical response would be or should be, given that framing from emergency response. And the immediate response that I received when I raised the issue was HIPAA, number one, and number two, aren't we fortunate that we have a fast response time? Both of which I understand and agree with, but it doesn't address my concern.
Were you concerned about the responders or with the school's response to the emergency? Just to be clear.
I was concerned with the fact that as an uninformed parent on the property and two police vehicles coming in with lights on two wheels and going the wrong way in a one-way circle, and an officer running to the front door, that there was something else going on in that building that was not what was actually happening. And I happen to be informed about the ambulance calls as a school committee member, but there was half a dozen other cars entering the school department at the time that it occurred, because it was 8:06 a.m. And I think that this relates to both an emergency response issue and a communications issue, that I'm just looking for
You want to
a
see
complete understanding of what we're doing here.
a procedural
Yeah.
guideline. If A happens, B happens. If B happens, this happens.
Yeah, and again, after a little bit of further understanding of what happened that morning, I understand exactly why it happened. Like, nobody did anything wrong, and that's not what I'm suggesting in any way, shape, or form. I don't think anybody did anything wrong, but we've had a number of first responders coming onto our property over the course of the last several months, and I'm concerned about perceptions relative to what's happening in the broader society around school safety. And I think it's something that should not be ignored or
Right. I think it's challenging too, because you don't want to set off alarms to the public every time there's an ambulance.
Yeah.
Because statistically, there's a lot of people in the buildings. There's a lot of buildings that we have. It's going to happen. So I think that's the concern, is you don't want to alarm people. But I think the idea would be if something keeps blowing up, people keep talking, and you hear it a lot in the community, maybe there is a need to have that message sent out. But I think it's also somewhat of a judgment call. It's like situational based and what happens.
But I think too, I don't think it's unreasonable that there would be, if I were a teacher in the school, if I saw A happen, I know what to do. You know, if I see this happen, I know I have to call 911. If I see this happen, I know I call the nurse. If that's what you're, like, who is in charge of calling 911? Under what
Everyone.
Everyone. Okay, well, see, that's what you need to know. And I may not know, so they are told that, and I think that's what he wants to.
I think it's scary as a parent too, just seeing it and you're just in the building.
Just to know what people have been told to call 911 for.
And in every case that you're referring to, it comes back to these were medical situations.
Right,
Which
right.
then opens the door to, well, what was it about? Well, why was there a police officer running in, and why did he come in the wrong way? I cannot disclose any additional information. It was a medical call.
Absolutely.
And anytime, you know, there are other situations medically that are not an emergency, but a child or a staff member needs to be transported to a hospital, and then they're not arriving in the way that you saw them arrive that day. When it's a 911 call that's going in, they're arriving the fastest route they can to that front door so that they can get into the building and get to where they need to be. And that's what you saw that day. If we were having a first responder response that had to do with school safety, yeah, we would be finding a way to communicate what was appropriate to communicate out in consultation with our emergency responders to, allay concerns for families. When it's individual medical situations, whether it be student or staff, again, I'm providing information that I cannot elaborate on.
The unknown is scary, and
Yeah.
you can't get to know the information though, sadly.
Yeah.
But it's like, but it's scary. It's still scary.
Again, I'm
No, I understand. It's
concerned that I
just-
have, and I don't feel like I got the answer that I'm looking for at this point. So, it is what it is. So,
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
So I have two comments. Number one, I don't think it's a good idea for us to go into anything more than a discussion of the chain of command or the chain of calling.
That's
Because
what he's talking about.
as somebody who has dealt with schools in a loop capacity, representing kids, representing teachers, there is nothing that is good that will come from doing anything more than acknowledging the presence of emergency personnel. We have HIPAA, we have FERPA, we have a whole bunch of legal rights that people have. And I understand people want to know, and I would want to know too, but unfortunately, it's none of our business. And it's certainly not something that we should be discussing in public. Carol, you give us the warning at the beginning of every meeting, students' names are not going to be used, and that's for a reason. The second thing is, I'm not sure this is something that requires the attention of the full school committee. If an individual school committee member has a question about the chain of command as it currently exists, then that person can be provided the list. And if they have an issue with the chain of command, it can be brought forward. But my concern is that we are just treading on very bad ground here, and I think that Dr. Burnham's repeated, I don't want to say it's a shibboleth, but her repeated mantra of, I can't tell you more, is ultimately going to be unsatisfying to everyone. And I think we got to just recognize that there are certain things that we as the public, we can't get those answers. And, I understand the concern, but it's not a good idea to go down this route.
I think you're probably pretty wise, Mr. Schoenbrini.
Whatever else we want.
And so I would suggest then that it makes sense to bring it back up with Dr. Burnham, that the safety committee is supposed to be talking about this, and if we have how is the staff informed, what do they do kind of document out there. I know as a classroom teacher, I had one on my desk that told me, if this happens, you do this, if that happens, you do that. I would think there is one that you could see.
We're actually working to cull down the lengthy emergency operation plans for all of those scenarios into something very succinct that's kind of step-oriented, so that people in an emergency, when they're maybe not thinking as clearly as they would otherwise,
This was
can go through a checklist of what to do. Now, sometimes certain protocols staff are going to have authority to act
Well,
on,
yeah.
like a 911 call, right? If you're in a room with a colleague or a student who's now having some sort of medical issue, you are absolutely authorized to call 911. If you hear something that causes alarm relative to school safety and an intruder in the building, or you see something that's of significant concern, teachers have been taught through training with the Alice drill, you call 911. So these sorts of things exist, and as I said to you, we're already planning for dispatch to come give an updated training on making a 911 call, so that while you're thinking rationally, you understand when they're asking you for the location, they're not asking you for the address of the building. They're not asking you for the name of your school. They're specifically asking, what is your location inside the building, so that they can get there as quickly as they can. So these things, they do exist. Staff are trained. I can do my best to summarize, as Mr. Schoolambrini talked about, some sort of chain of communication sequence for different types of events. But again, that would be worked through with the safety team.
Safety team.
Thank you.
Okay. So, I think we're at the end of our rope here.
I'll make the motion to adjourn at 10 p.m.
I'll second.
And we need a roll call vote.
Mr. Schoolambrini,
Yes.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Leighton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Shamrock.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
Tony.
you. Bye, Tony.
Bye.